The billionaire caught her janitor sneaking into her disabled son's bedroom at midnight. But what she discovered wasn't theft. It was something far more dangerous. Hope. Sabrina Vale built her empire on cold logic and ruthless decisions. She controlled boardrooms, crushed competitors, and managed her son's terminal illness with military precision and unlimited money. But the quiet man who cleaned her floors was doing something her team of specialists couldn't, making her dying child laugh again. When she finally learned his secret, it would shatter everything she believed about power, worth, and the price of saving the person you love most. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this journey travels. Now let me tell you about the night everything changed. The elevator doors whispered open into the penthouse foyer at 11:47 p.m., and Sabrina Vale stepped into the kind of silence that money could buy. White marble floors stretched toward floor-to-ceiling windows, showcasing the glittering sprawl of Beverly Hills below. The space was immaculate, every surface gleaming, every shadow precisely placed by designer lighting that cost more than most people's cars. Sabrina dropped her Hermes briefcase beside the entryway table, the sharp click echoing through the emptiness. She'd left the board meeting early, something she never did, because the quarterly reports could wait and the knot of anxiety in her chest couldn't. 3 months of watching her son fade into silence had finally broken through her legendary focus. She kicked off her Louboutins and padded across the cool marble in stockinged feet, already reaching for her phone to check the nanny cam. Then she heard it. Laughter. Not the polite, careful sound Jace made when the nurses tried too hard. Not the weak chuckle that broke her heart every time she heard it. This was real, bright and unguarded, and so achingly normal that Sabrina froze mid-step, her breath catching in her throat. Her son was laughing like a 6-year-old should laugh. Sabrina moved toward the sound on instinct, her executive mind cataloging impossibilities. The night nurse wasn't scheduled until midnight. The physical therapist had left at 7. The specialist team had packed up their equipment hours ago, leaving behind their careful notes and apologetic faces that said what they wouldn't. We've done everything we can. The laughter came again, followed by a voice she almost didn't recognize. Jace's voice, animated and excited in a way she hadn't heard since before the diagnosis. Again! Do it again! Sabrina's hand touched the doorframe of Jace's bedroom, and she peered through the half-open door into a scene that made no sense. The room was supposed to be a sterile recovery space. She'd spent $250,000 transforming it into a medical suite disguised as a child's bedroom. Specialized bed, monitoring equipment, grab bars installed at precise heights recommended by 3 different consultants. Everything organized, controlled, managed. Instead, she found chaos. Someone had pushed the expensive furniture aside to create an open space on the plush carpet. Pillows from the bed were arranged in a careful line. The decorative ottoman had been repurposed as some kind of balance beam. And in the middle of it all, her son, her beautiful boy who hadn't stood without assistance in 4 months, was on his feet, gripping the hands of the janitor. Caleb Reed knelt before Jace with the kind of focus Sabrina usually saw in surgeons. His large, work-worn hands supported Jace's small ones with surprising gentleness, his voice steady and encouraging. That's it, buddy. Feel your weight shifting? Left foot, right foot. You're doing the work, not me. I'm just here in case. It doesn't hurt, Jace said, wonder filling his voice. Caleb, it doesn't hurt. That's because we're listening to your body, Caleb said. Remember what we talked about? The muscles get tight when we push too fast. But when we move slow and steady, when we breathe and focus, they remember how to work, Jace finished, his face split by a grin so wide it physically hurt Sabrina to look at. Exactly. Now, 3 more steps to the pillow. You've got this. Sabrina watched her son move, awkward, trembling, but moving, and something fierce and terrifying rose in her chest. This man, this quiet janitor she barely noticed beyond signing his paycheck, was doing something impossible. Every specialist had said the same thing. Duchenne muscular dystrophy was progressive and degenerative. The wheelchair wasn't temporary. The muscle weakness would only get worse. The best they could hope for was to slow the decline, manage the pain, and prepare for the inevitable. But here was Jace, taking steps, laughing, looking at Caleb Reed like he'd hung the moon. Sabrina's shock crystallized into something sharper. She pushed the door open fully, her presence filling the room like a cold front. What the hell is going on here? Caleb's head snapped up, and for a split second, Sabrina saw something flash across his face. Not guilt, but something more complex. Resignation, maybe. Or exhaustion. Then his expression smoothed into the same neutral calm he wore when emptying trash bins in her office. Miss Vale? He carefully helped Jace sit on the edge of the bed, his movements unhurried despite the tension crackling in the air. I wasn't expecting you home tonight. Clearly. Sabrina's voice could have frozen vodka. She crossed the room in 3 strides, her professional armor snapping into place. Jace, are you hurt? Mom, I was walking. Jace's joy was incandescent. Did you see? I took almost 10 steps. Caleb says if we keep working, I might... Jace, honey, go brush your teeth. Now. The command was gentle, but absolute. Jace's face fell, but he knew better than to argue when his mother used that tone. Caleb offered him a hand up, but Sabrina was faster, scooping her son into her arms with the kind of desperate care that belied her cold voice. I can walk there, Jace protested softly. Caleb taught me. Teeth. We'll talk after. Sabrina carried him toward the bathroom, feeling how light he was, how fragile. Duchenne stole so much: strength, independence, time. The disease was a thief that couldn't be negotiated with or outmaneuvered, and God knew she'd tried. She set Jace down by the sink and closed the bathroom door before turning to face Caleb. The janitor had stood, his tall frame somehow taking up less space than it should, like he'd practiced being invisible. He wore the same Navy work uniform he always did, his name embroidered over the pocket in simple letters. His dark hair needed a cut, and there was a stain on his sleeve that looked like cleaning solution. He looked exactly like what he was supposed to be. Hired help. Except for his eyes. Those eyes were too steady, too knowing, assessing her with a quiet intelligence that set off every alarm bell in Sabrina's head. How long has this been going on? Her voice was surgical, precise, and cutting. About 6 weeks, Caleb said evenly. I finish my regular duties around 8. Jace is usually still awake, so You've been conducting unauthorized physical therapy on my medically fragile child for 6 weeks? Sabrina's control cracked just enough to let fury seep through. Do you have any idea what you could have done to him? The liability? He was lonely. The simple words hit harder than any argument could have. Sabrina's momentum faltered. Caleb didn't step back or look away. I'd see him through the doorway when I cleaned, always alone. The nurses would check his vitals and leave. The therapist would run him through exercises like he was a machine that needed maintenance. Nobody talked to him. Nobody played with him. He's 6 years old, and he was disappearing into that silence. You don't know anything about my son's care, Sabrina said, but the words came out defensive rather than commanding. You're right. I'm not a doctor. Caleb's voice stayed level, but something shifted in his posture, a kind of weary determination. But I know what it looks like when a kid gives up. And Jace was giving up. The truth of it was a knife between Sabrina's ribs. She'd seen it too, had woken at 3 a.m. in hotel rooms across 3 continents with the image of Jace's empty eyes haunting her. She'd thrown money at the problem, better specialists, experimental treatments, the best care money could buy. But she hadn't been there. Not really. Not in the way that mattered. So you decided to play doctor? Sabrina's voice hardened again because anger was safer than guilt. You have no qualifications, no training? I have both, actually. Sabrina stopped. What? Caleb reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn wallet. From it, he extracted a laminated card, a degree from UCLA in occupational therapy, dated 8 years ago. The photo showed a younger version of the man before her, smiling with an optimism that the current Caleb had long since buried. Sabrina stared at the card. You're a licensed therapist. Was. The license lapsed when I couldn't afford the renewal fees or continuing education requirements. Caleb took the card back, his expression unreadable. Life got complicated. Then why the hell are you cleaning my floors? The question came out sharper than Sabrina intended, but Caleb didn't flinch. He slipped the card back into his wallet with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to protect the few valuable things he had left. Because clinics wanted 3 years of specialized experience I didn't have. Because interview panels saw single father on my resume and heard unreliable. Because therapy positions pay well but require evening and weekend hours, and I needed a job with a schedule that let me pick up my daughter from school every day. His voice never rose, but each word carried the weight of battles fought and lost. Janitorial work pays enough to keep a roof over our heads, and the night shift means I'm home when Lily needs me. So I clean floors. Sabrina's mind raced, trying to reconcile the janitor she'd barely noticed with the educated professional standing before her. You have a daughter. Lily, she's 8, autistic. Caleb's expression softened slightly when he said her name. My wife Sarah was a pediatric therapist, speech and physical. She taught me everything I know about working with kids who need extra support. When she got sick, he stopped, and Sabrina recognized the pause. She'd made that same pause countless times when people asked about Jace's father, when the explanation was too complicated and too painful to put into words for strangers. Sarah died 3 years ago, Caleb finally continued. Cancer. By the time we caught it, there wasn't much time left. She spent what she had teaching me how to help Lily, how to read her cues, how to adapt therapy techniques for home use. Said I needed to be ready for when she was gone. The bathroom door opened, and Jace emerged in his pajamas, toothbrush in hand. Mom, Caleb isn't in trouble, is he? Please don't be mad at him. He's my friend. Sabrina looked at her son, really looked at him. There was color in his cheeks that hadn't been there in months. His eyes were bright, alert, hopeful. And the way he looked at Caleb Reed contained something Sabrina hadn't seen directed at anyone in a long time. Absolute trust. Go to bed, sweetheart, she said quietly. We're just talking. But bed, Jace. Caleb moved to help Jace into bed, but Sabrina was faster again, lifting her son and tucking him under the covers with practiced efficiency. She kissed his forehead, breathing in the baby shampoo scent that was already fading as he grew up too fast. Tomorrow we'll talk about this, okay? But right now, you need rest. You won't fire Caleb, will you? Jace's small hand gripped hers with surprising strength. Please, Mom, he makes everything better. We'll figure it out, Sabrina said, which was not a promise and not a denial. She waited until Jace's eyes drifted closed before standing and gesturing for Caleb to follow her out of the room. They stood in the hallway, the space feeling smaller than it should have. Sabrina crossed her arms, her executive mask firmly in place. This stops. Tonight. Whatever you've been doing, it ends now. Understood. Caleb's easy agreement somehow made her angrier. Do you have any idea what could happen if he got hurt? If something went wrong, my lawyers would bury you. The liability alone. I know. Then why? The question burst out before Sabrina could stop it. Why risk your job, a lawsuit, everything, for a kid you barely know? Caleb was quiet for a long moment, his gaze steady on hers. Because I've been where Jace is. Not the same disease, but the same loneliness. The same feeling that your body is betraying you and nobody really understands. And I've seen what happens when kids like that don't have someone who believes they can be more than their diagnosis. You're not his therapist. You're not even supposed to be in his room. You're right, Caleb agreed. But when I heard him crying one night about 2 months ago, really crying, the kind that comes from somewhere deep, I couldn't just walk past and pretend I didn't hear. So I asked if he was okay. And we started talking. Just talking at first. He told me about missing soccer, about how none of his friends from school visited anymore, about how everyone treated him like he was already gone. Sabrina's chest tightened. She hadn't known about the crying, hadn't known about most of it. I told him about Lily, Caleb continued, about how she struggles with things other kids find easy, how frustrated she gets when her body doesn't cooperate with what her mind wants to do. We talked about what it's like to be different, and then one night he asked if the exercises the therapist did actually helped, or if they were just pretending. What did you say? I said they helped, but only if he believed they could, that his body needed his brain to be on board, to be a partner instead of an enemy. So we started doing little things, stretches, breathing exercises, basic range of motion work, nothing aggressive, nothing that pushed past his pain threshold. Caleb pulled a small notebook from his back pocket and handed it to Sabrina. She opened it to find detailed logs, dates, times, exercises performed, Jace's responses, notes on what worked and what didn't. The handwriting was neat and precise, the observations professional. I tracked everything, Caleb said. Every session, every movement, every time he said something hurt. I watched for signs of overexertion, monitored his breathing, checked for muscle fatigue. This isn't me playing around. This is me using the skills I spent 4 years learning and 2 years applying before life got in the way. Sabrina flipped through the pages, her trained eye catching the medical terminology, the systematic approach, the clear progression of exercises building on each other. This wasn't amateur work. This was skilled therapy being delivered by someone who actually understood pediatric care. But it was also completely unauthorized, unmonitored by Jace's actual medical team, and happening behind her back. "You should have told me," she said, closing the notebook. "Would you have said yes?" The honest answer sat between them like a third presence. No, she wouldn't have. She would have seen liability and risk and loss of control. She would have said no and fired him immediately, and Jace would have lost the one person who'd made him smile in months. "That's not the point," Sabrina said finally. "You went behind my back. You put my son at risk." "He's stronger now than he was 6 weeks ago," Caleb interrupted quietly. "Check the measurements if you don't believe me. His grip strength has improved. His range of motion is better. The muscle atrophy has slowed. Those are facts, Miss Vale. Whatever you think of how we got here, Jace is better. Or you got lucky and nothing bad happened yet." Sabrina handed the notebook back. "This ends tonight. You go back to cleaning floors and staying out of rooms you're not assigned to. If Jace needs therapy, his actual medical team will provide it." Something flickered across Caleb's face, disappointment maybe, or resignation. "And if he asks for me?" "You'll tell him circumstances have changed." Sabrina's voice stayed firm, even as guilt clawed at her. "You're a janitor, Mr. Reed, not his therapist, not his friend. That's the boundary, and you crossed it. This is me putting it back." "Understood." Caleb's expression smoothed into neutrality again. That same invisible worker mask he wore so well. "I'll finish tonight's cleaning and see myself out." He turned to leave, and Sabrina almost let him go. Almost. But something in the notebook, in those careful observations and the clear evidence of someone who genuinely cared about her son's progress, made her call out, "Wait!" Caleb stopped, looking back with those steady, knowing eyes. "Why did you really do this?" Sabrina asked. "The truth." Caleb considered the question, then gave her an answer she wasn't expecting. "Because Sarah used to say that every kid deserves at least one person who sees their potential instead of their limitations. She was that person for hundreds of children before cancer took her. I couldn't save her, Ms. Vale, but I can honor what she taught me by being that person for kids like Jace when the opportunity comes up, even if it costs me." He walked away then, his footsteps quiet on the marble floor, and Sabrina stood alone in the hallway of her $1 million penthouse, feeling like the poorest person in the building. The next morning, Sabrina sat in her office overlooking Century City and did what she always did when faced with a problem. She gathered information. Dr. Patricia Huang, Jace's primary neurologist, appeared on her video screen with the kind of carefully neutral expression doctors wore when delivering bad news gently. "Sabrina, I got your message. What's this about unauthorized therapy?" Sabrina relayed the previous night's discovery, watching Patricia's expression shift from concern to surprise to something more complicated. "You're telling me your janitor has been working with Jace for 6 weeks, and you're just now finding out?" "I travel extensively for work," Sabrina said, defensiveness creeping into her voice. "Jace has round-the-clock care. I trusted the system." "The system involves communication." Patricia's tone was professional but pointed. "But putting that aside, you said you saw improvement." "He claims there's been improvement. Better grip strength, improved range of motion, slowed atrophy." Patricia pulled up Jace's chart on her own screen. "Interesting. His last assessment 2 weeks ago showed slight improvements that we attributed to the new medication protocol. But if there's been consistent physical activity we weren't aware of, could it be helping?" Sabrina asked. "Legitimately helping?" "Physical therapy is a cornerstone of Duchenne management," Patricia said carefully. "But it has to be done right. Overexertion can cause muscle damage that accelerates the disease progression. The wrong exercises can injure joints, and without proper medical oversight, so it could be dangerous." "It could be." or it could be exactly what Jace needs. Patricia leaned back in her chair. Duchenne is degenerative, but that doesn't mean we give up on quality of life. Appropriate exercise helps maintain muscle function, supports cardiovascular health, and perhaps most importantly for a 6-year-old, provides a sense of agency and normalcy. The question is whether this janitor, regardless of his credentials, is qualified to make those clinical judgments. He has a degree in occupational therapy from UCLA. Patricia's eyebrows rose. Does he now? And he's working as a janitor because life got complicated, apparently. Sabrina didn't elaborate. Caleb's personal struggles weren't the point. But his license lapsed. He's not currently certified to practice. That's a problem from a legal and medical oversight standpoint, Patricia agreed. But if his clinical knowledge is sound and he's been documenting the work properly, there might be something worth exploring here. Can I see his notes? Sabrina had photographed every page of Caleb's notebook before returning it. She sent the files to Patricia and waited while the doctor reviewed them, watching her expression shift from skeptical to thoughtful to impressed. This is solid work, Patricia said finally. Very solid, actually. He's tracking the right metrics, building progressions appropriately, noting contraindications. This is what I'd expect from a practicing therapist, not a janitor. So what do I do? Patricia considered the question. Officially, I have to recommend you stop immediately and coordinate all therapy through Jace's medical team. The liability issues alone make anything else problematic. And unofficially? Unofficially? Patricia's expression softened. Jace has been declining emotionally for months. The physical symptoms we can manage with medication and monitored therapy, but the psychological component is harder. Depression, isolation, loss of hope, those things accelerate disease progression in ways we can't always measure. If this man has given Jace something to look forward to, some sense of progress and possibility, that has real therapeutic value. Even if it's not strictly medical? Especially because it's not strictly medical. Patricia closed the chart files. Our job is to manage Jace's disease, but someone needs to remember he's still a child who needs connection, play, and reasons to try. If your janitor understands that in ways the medical team has missed, maybe the question isn't whether to stop him, but how to integrate what he's doing into Jace's official care plan. You're suggesting I hire him? Sabrina couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. I'm suggesting you don't dismiss something that's working just because it doesn't fit the expected format. But yes, if his clinical skills are as solid as these notes suggest, bringing him on board officially might serve Jace better than shutting him out completely. At minimum, have him work with the therapy team so we can monitor what he's doing and ensure it's safe. Sabrina ended the call and sat in the silence of her office, looking out over the city she'd conquered through sheer force of will and strategic thinking. She'd built her company by identifying value others missed, by seeing potential in people and technologies before the market caught up. But she'd missed Caleb Reed completely. She pulled up his employment file, seeing his application for the first time. High school education listed, janitorial certification, references from previous cleaning contracts. Nothing about UCLA. Nothing about occupational therapy. Nothing about the person behind the uniform. Because she'd never asked, never looked, never saw him as anything more than part of the machinery that kept her life running smoothly. Sabrina pulled up the security footage from the penthouse, scrolling back through weeks of recorded hallways. There, Caleb arriving at 6 p.m. with his cleaning cart. There, finishing the main rooms by 7:45. And there, slipping into Jace's room around 8, staying until nearly midnight, leaving with the careful quiet of someone who'd practiced being invisible. She watched him work with Jace, even without sound, seeing the patience, the encouragement, the way he celebrated small victories like they were Olympic achievements. She saw her son's face transform from the hollow resignation she'd learned to dread into something brighter, something that looked dangerously like joy. And she saw herself in the background of some footage, walking past Jace's room without stopping, phone pressed to her ear, briefcase in hand, always moving toward the next meeting, the next deal, the next thing that demanded her attention more than her dying son. The guilt was a physical weight in her chest. Sabrina closed the laptop and made a decision. She didn't call Caleb, didn't arrange a formal meeting. Instead, she did something she never did. She came home early. At 6:30 p.m., Sabrina walked into her penthouse and found Caleb in the kitchen, cleaning the granite countertops with methodical precision. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his face before the neutral mask slid back into place. "Ms. Vale, I wasn't expecting you." "I know." Sabrina set down her briefcase. "Where's Jace?" "With the evening nurse. They're reading in his room." Caleb returned to his cleaning, not meeting her eyes. "I'll be finished in about 20 minutes, and then I'll get out of your way. Actually, I want to talk to you about that." Caleb's hand stilled on the counter. "If this is about last night, I already said I understood. I haven't been back in Jace's room. Won't be again." "What if I want you to go back?" Now he did look at her, confusion clear in his expression. "I don't understand." Sabrina pulled out her phone and showed him Patricia's email summary, the one that concluded, "If Mr. Reed is willing to work within a supervised framework, integrating his approach with Jace's existing care team could provide significant benefits. The emotional and psychological improvements alone warrant consideration." "You want to hire me?" Caleb said slowly, reading the email. "As what, exactly?" "As exactly what you've been doing, but officially. We'd get your license reinstated. I'll cover the fees and continuing education costs. You'd work with Dr. Huang and the therapy team to develop an integrated care plan for Jace. Proper oversight, proper documentation, everything legal and above board." Caleb handed the phone back, his expression unreadable. "That's generous. Too generous, actually. What's the catch?" "No catch. You'd be compensated appropriately for professional work rather than janitorial rates. We'd work around your daughter's schedule." "Stop!" Caleb's voice was firm. "Ms. Vale, I appreciate the offer. I do. But I need you to understand something. I didn't work with Jace to angle for a better job. I did it because he needed someone and I was there. That's it." "I know that," Sabrina said. "That's exactly why I'm making this offer. Because you saw my son as a person instead of a problem to manage or a paycheck to collect. Because you cared when you had no professional obligation to care. And that's worth hiring someone whose license lapsed because he couldn't afford to maintain it?" Caleb's voice held an edge of bitterness. "Someone who's been cleaning floors for 3 years because no legitimate clinic would take a chance on him? It's worth hiring someone with documented skills who's made measurable improvements in my son's condition when specialists with perfect credentials couldn't." Sabrina met his gaze steadily. "I don't care about your employment gap or your lapsed license or any of the other reasons you got overlooked before. I care about results. And I care about Jace's well-being. You've demonstrated both." Caleb was quiet for a long moment, conflict clear on his face. "What about my current job, the janitorial contract? You'd finish it properly. 2 weeks notice, professional transition, full recommendation. Then you'd start the new position." Sabrina had already worked out the details. "We'd begin with a 3-month trial period. You'd work with the medical team to develop the care plan, reinstate your license, and prove the arrangement benefits Jace. If it works, we make it permanent. If it doesn't, we part ways professionally, and I provide references for your next position. Either way, you get your credentials back." "Why?" The question was quiet but intense. "You barely know me. You could hire anyone, someone with current credentials, someone with elite experience, someone who fits the profile of what a Beverly Hills therapist should be." "I could," Sabrina agreed, "but those people would see Jace as a client. You see him as a kid. There's a difference." Caleb leaned against the counter, his broad shoulders carrying tension. "I need to think about it. Talk to Lily, make sure this wouldn't disrupt her routine. She doesn't handle change well." "Of course. Take the time you need." Sabrina checked her watch. "But while you're thinking, would you mind checking on Jace? He asked for you 3 times today. The nurses didn't know what to tell him." Something shifted in Caleb's expression, concern mixed with reluctance. "You said this morning. This morning I was operating on incomplete information and fear," Sabrina interrupted. "Tonight I have more facts and a better plan. So if you're willing, I'd like you to see Jace. Just to talk. Let him know you're still here. Nothing else changes until we've formalized an arrangement." Caleb studied her face like he was trying to read a balance sheet, looking for the hidden costs in fine print. Finally, he nodded. 5 minutes, just to say hello." Take as long as you need. Sabrina watched him walk toward Jace's room, then followed at a distance, positioning herself where she could observe without intruding. The nurse, a kind woman named Maria, looked up in surprise when Caleb appeared in the doorway, but stepped aside when Sabrina nodded permission. "Caleb!" Jace's face lit up like Christmas morning. "You came back. Mom said you might not, and I thought, hey, buddy." Caleb settled into the chair beside Jace's bed with easy familiarity. "Sorry about that. Your mom and I had to work some things out. Adults are complicated sometimes." "Are you in trouble because of me?" Jace's joy dimmed, worry creeping in. "No, nobody's in trouble." Caleb reached out and ruffled Jace's hair gently. Sometimes when people care about someone, they have different ideas about how to help. Your mom loves you a lot, so she was worried when she saw us working together. That's normal. That's what parents do. "But we were doing good stuff," Jace protested. "I got stronger. You said so." "You did get stronger. That's true." Caleb's voice stayed calm and reassuring. "And your mom wants you to keep getting stronger. We're just figuring out the best way to make that happen. Okay?" "Okay." Jace didn't look entirely convinced, but he trusted Caleb enough to accept the answer. "Will you still help me with the exercises?" "I hope so. We're working on it." Caleb glanced toward the doorway where Sabrina stood, his expression asking a question. Sabrina stepped into the room, and Jace's attention shifted to her with cautious hope. "Mom? Is Caleb staying?" "We're discussing it," Sabrina said, moving to sit on the other side of Jace's bed. She took her son's small hand in hers, feeling the fragility of his grip. "But whatever happens with Caleb's job, I'm going to be here more. A lot more. I've been gone too much, sweetheart. I'm sorry for that." "You have important work," Jay said, with the kind of understanding that broke Sabrina's heart. "You have to travel and be in meetings." "I have important work right here," Sabrina corrected gently. "You're my most important work, Jace, and I forgot that for a while. I thought I was helping by making sure you had the best doctors and the best equipment and everything money could buy. But what you really needed was someone to be with you, someone to believe you could do more than just survive." She looked at Caleb, seeing him truly for the first time, not as staff, not as a problem, but as the person who'd shown her son what she'd almost forgotten to give him: hope. "So we're going to make some changes," Sabrina continued. "Better changes this time. Changes that put you first." Jace squeezed her hand weakly. "Does that mean Caleb can stay?" "It means we're going to try to work something out that's good for everyone," Sabrina said. "But I need you to promise me something. If you ever hurt during exercises or something doesn't feel right, you tell us immediately. No pushing through pain to make anyone proud. Deal?" "Deal," Jace agreed readily. Then, with the directness only children possess, "Mom, do you like Caleb?" Sabrina blinked at the question. I respect his work with you." "That's not what I asked." Jace looked between them with 6-year-old wisdom. "He makes you less scary. Usually you're like a robot, but tonight you seem more like a mom." Out of the mouths of babes, Sabrina felt heat rise in her cheeks, an unfamiliar sensation for someone who commanded boardrooms without flinching. "I think it's bedtime, young man." "I'm not tired," Jace protested, but a yawn undermined his argument. Caleb stood, offering Sabrina the space to settle Jace into bed. "I should finish up and get going. Lily's with a sitter, and she gets anxious if I'm too late." "Tomorrow," Sabrina said, surprising herself with the firmness of the decision. "Come back tomorrow evening, and we'll talk specifics. Think about the offer, discuss it with your daughter, and we'll work out a plan that serves everyone." "Tomorrow," Caleb agreed. He paused at the doorway, looking back at Jace. "Get some rest, buddy. Dream big." "You too, Caleb. Tell Lily I said hi, even though we've never met." "I'll tell her." Caleb's smile was soft, genuine. Then he was gone, leaving Sabrina alone with her son. She tucked the blankets around Jace, smoothing his hair back from his forehead the way she used to when he was a baby, before the diagnosis, before everything got so complicated and frightening. "Mom?" Jace's voice was drowsy. "If Caleb stays, do you think maybe sometime I could meet Lily? He talks about her sometimes. She sounds nice." "Maybe," Sabrina said, the word carrying more weight than a simple maybe should. "Because if Caleb stayed, If this arrangement worked, it would mean letting someone into their carefully controlled world in ways she hadn't allowed since Jace's father left. It would mean trust and vulnerability and all the messy complications that came with seeing employees as human beings with their own lives and struggles. It would mean change. "Love you, Mom," Jace mumbled, already half asleep. "Love you too, sweetheart. More than anything." Sabrina sat with him until his breathing deepened into sleep, then moved to the windows overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, Caleb Reed was returning to his own life, to a daughter who needed him, to an apartment that wasn't a penthouse, to challenges Sabrina could only imagine. She pulled out her phone and did what she always did when faced with insufficient data. She researched. Caleb Reed's social media presence was minimal, a Facebook account rarely updated, mostly photos of a beautiful little girl with dark curly hair and her father's steady eyes. Lily at the park. Lily with a drawing she'd made. Lily and Caleb at a community center, surrounded by other children. Sabrina zoomed in on that last photo and her breath caught. The community center was barely holding together. Cracked walls, outdated equipment, the institutional grimness of a place running on hope and insufficient funding. But the children's faces were bright with engagement, and Caleb stood among them with the same patient presence he brought to Jace's room. She clicked through to the center's website and found a bare-bones page describing programs for special needs children, funded primarily through donations and volunteer work. A schedule showed weekly activities, adaptive sports, art therapy, social skills groups, all run by volunteers, including Caleb Reed listed as Therapeutic Activities Coordinator. Sabrina read the description. Caleb brings professional expertise and personal understanding to his work with our kids. He creates safe, supportive environments where children with physical and developmental challenges can build skills, confidence, and friendships. His dedication and compassion make him invaluable to our community. She sat back, pieces clicking into place. The mystery bag she'd seen him carrying wasn't for theft. It was equipment for the center. The late nights weren't suspicious. They were service. The man she'd dismissed as just a janitor was someone who'd chosen purpose over prestige, who measured success in children's smiles rather than salary figures. He was, in ways that made her uncomfortable to acknowledge, living a richer life than hers. Sabrina looked at her own social media, carefully curated images of her at industry events, accepting awards, speaking at conferences, professional triumphs documented and shared. But nothing personal, nothing real, nothing that showed who she was when the cameras turned off and the applause faded. Nothing of Jace, because she'd learned early that the world saw his disease as weakness, as failure, as something to pity or exploit. She'd hidden her son to protect him, had built walls of money and privacy and control around their life. But somewhere in all that protecting, she'd stopped seeing him too. Stopped seeing the boy beneath the diagnosis, the personality beyond the prognosis. Caleb had seen him. Had seen what she'd missed while she was too busy managing and controlling and trying to fix the unfixable. Sabrina closed her eyes and made a decision that terrified her more than any business deal. She was going to stop trying to control everything and start trusting someone else to help carry the weight. Even if that someone was a janitor with a lapsed license and a mystery bag full of homemade therapy tools. The next evening, Caleb arrived at 6 p.m. sharp, and this time he wasn't wearing his janitorial uniform. Instead, he dressed in dark jeans and a button-down shirt that looked recently ironed, his hair freshly cut. He carried a folder of papers and the same quiet dignity he always wore, but there was something different in his posture, a kind of cautious hope. Sabrina met him in the living room rather than Jace's bedroom, wanting this conversation to happen on neutral ground. She'd prepared coffee and set out the chair across from hers with deliberate care, trying to create a space that felt less like an interview and more like a collaboration. "Thank you for coming," she said as he settled into the chair. "Did you have time to think about the offer?" "I did." Caleb accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. "I talked to Lily, explained the situation in ways she could understand, asked if she'd be okay with Daddy having a different job that might mean some changes to our schedule. And? She wanted to know if the new job would make me happier." Caleb's expression softened. "I told her I thought it might. She said that was good because I don't smile enough anymore." Sabrina felt something twist in her chest. What did you tell her about Jace? The truth, that there's a little boy who needs help, and I might be able to provide it. She asked if he was nice, and I said yes. Then she asked if she could meet him sometime. Caleb paused, uncertainty crossing his face. I know that might be complicated. Jace asked the same thing, Sabrina interrupted. Last night, before he fell asleep. He wanted to know if he could meet Lily. Caleb's surprise was genuine. He did? He said you talk about her sometimes. That she sounds nice. Sabrina wrapped her hands around her own coffee mug, needing something to do with the nervous energy. I think maybe it would be good for both of them. Jace doesn't have friends his age anymore. The disease scared them off, or their parents got uncomfortable, or the medical equipment made everything too weird. He's lonely in ways I don't know how to fix. Lily knows about lonely, Caleb said quietly. She struggles to connect with other kids. The autism makes social situations hard, and kids can be cruel about differences they don't understand. But she's kind and patient, and she has this amazing ability to see beauty in things other people overlook. She sounds wonderful. She is. Caleb's voice held fierce pride and protective love. She's my miracle. After Sarah died, I didn't know how I'd manage. Single father, special needs child, no support system nearby. But Lily, she saves me more than I save her. She reminds me every day that different doesn't mean less, that struggle doesn't define worth. Sabrina recognized the truth in his words because she'd learned the same lesson, just from a different angle. Jace's disease had stripped away her illusions about control and revealed what actually mattered. Moments of connection, genuine laughter, the fierce love that transcended medical prognoses and business success. I want to accept your offer, Caleb said, pulling her from her thoughts, but I need to be clear about my boundaries and requirements. I'm listening. Caleb opened his folder and pulled out a handwritten list, not demanding but clear and specific. First, my schedule needs to accommodate Lily. She has therapies twice a week that I can't miss. School pickup is non-negotiable. If she has a meltdown or medical issue, I need to be able to leave immediately. Done, Sabrina said without hesitation. We'll build the schedule around your needs with Lily. Second, I want full transparency with Jace's medical team. No secrets, no working behind anyone's back. If something I'm doing concerns them medically, I need to know immediately so we can adjust. Agreed. Dr. Wong already said she wants regular coordination meetings. Third, I need to maintain my work at the community center. Those kids depend on me, and I'm not abandoning them just because I have a better opportunity. Sabrina hadn't expected that, but she found herself respecting it. How much time does the center require? Saturday mornings, 3 hours. Sometimes I help with special events or emergency coverage, but the regular commitment is Saturdays. Can I ask you something about that? Sabrina pulled out her phone and showed him the community center's website. You're listed as the therapeutic activities coordinator, but that's volunteer work. You're not paid. No, Caleb confirmed. The center can barely keep the lights on. They can't afford to pay staff beyond the director and one administrative assistant. The rest of us volunteer because the work matters. What if it didn't have to be volunteer? Sabrina's mind was already working through possibilities. What if there was funding for proper staffing, updated equipment, program expansion? Caleb's expression shifted to wariness. I'm not accepting your offer, so you'll donate to the center. That's not how this works. I know that, Sabrina said. But I'm a businesswoman, Caleb. I identify needs and resources and find ways to create value. That center serves a population that's chronically underserved. With proper funding, you could expand your reach, professionalize your programs, maybe even hire additional therapists to serve more children. That's not charity. That's investment in community infrastructure that benefits kids like Lily and Jace. You're serious. I'm always serious about business. Sabrina allowed herself a slight smile. And if I'm going to hire you away from your janitorial position, I should probably make sure the other work you care about doesn't suffer for it. Call it enlightened self-interest. Caleb shook his head slowly, something like wonder crossing his face. Sarah used to say that the world needed more people who saw problems as opportunities instead of obstacles. She'd have liked you. The compliment landed harder than Sabrina expected. I'd have liked to meet her, Anyone who taught you to see children the way you do must have been remarkable. She was. Caleb's voice held old grief worn smooth by time. She saw potential in everyone, patients, colleagues, even me when I was an overwhelmed therapy student who didn't think I had what it took. She believed in people before they believed in themselves. You do the same thing, Sabrina observed. With Jace, with the kids at the center, you see who they could be, not just who they are right now. I learned from the best. Caleb set down his coffee mug. So if we're doing this, if I'm accepting your offer, I need you to understand something. I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear just because you're paying me. If I think something isn't in Jace's best interest medically or emotionally, I'll say so. If the team is missing something, I'll speak up. I work for Jace's well-being, not your comfort. Good, Sabrina said firmly. I don't want a yes man. I want a professional who'll tell me the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. And if we disagree about his care, then we discuss it like adults, consult with Dr. Huang, and make decisions based on what's best for Jace rather than who's right. Sabrina leaned forward. I'm used to being the final authority in every situation, Caleb, but I'm smart enough to know when someone else has expertise I lack. You've proven you understand my son in ways I missed. I'd be an idiot not to listen to that. Caleb studied her face, that same careful assessment she'd seen before. Finally, he nodded. Okay, then I accept. 3-month trial, full integration with the medical team. We figure out the details as we go. Thank you. Sabrina extended her hand and Caleb shook it with a grip that was firm but not aggressive, the handshake of an equal, not an employee. They spent the next hour working through logistics, salary, more than Sabrina initially offered once she saw Caleb's surprise at the number, benefits, full health coverage for both Caleb and Lily, schedule, flexible around both children's needs, and the framework for working with Dr. Huang's team. Caleb would start after completing his 2-week notice, during which time they'd handle license reinstatement and get him up to speed on Jace's complete medical history. As they finalized details, Jace's voice called from his bedroom. Mom, is Caleb here yet? I heard voices. Sabrina and Caleb exchanged looks. Should we tell him? She asked. Together, Caleb suggested. They walked to Jace's room and found him sitting up in bed, hope and anxiety warring on his young face. When he saw both of them, his expression transformed into tentative joy. Hey, buddy, Caleb said, settling into the familiar chair. Your mom and I have been talking about some changes. Good changes or bad changes? Jace asked cautiously. Good ones, we think, Sabrina said, sitting on the other side of the bed. Caleb's going to stop being our janitor and start being your therapist instead. Officially this time, working with Dr. Huang and everyone else to help you get stronger. Jace's eyes went wide. Really? You're staying? I'm staying, Caleb confirmed. We're going to do this right. Proper schedule, coordination with your doctors, everything safe and supervised. Sound good? Sounds perfect. Jace looked at his mother. Can we start tonight? Please. Tomorrow, Sabrina said gently. Tonight you rest. But tomorrow we start the new plan. What about Lily? Jace asked Caleb. Is she okay with you having a new job? She's happy for me, Caleb said. And actually, she'd like to meet you sometime if that's okay. Your mom and I thought maybe we could arrange it. Somewhere casual, no pressure. Just 2 kids hanging out. Like the park? Jace suggested eagerly. I haven't been to the park in forever. The nurses say it's too risky, but maybe with you there. Caleb looked at Sabrina, the question clear in his eyes. She felt the familiar spike of fear. What if Jace got hurt? What if he overexerted? What if something went wrong, but pushed through it to find the answer underneath? Her son wanted to go to the park like a normal kid. When had she stopped letting him try to be normal? We'll talk to Dr. Huang about it, Sabrina said. If she approves, then yes. We'll go to the park. Jace's smile could have powered the penthouse. This is the best day ever. Later, after Jace had fallen asleep and Caleb had left with promises to return tomorrow, Sabrina stood at her windows again and looked out over the city lights. Somewhere out there, Caleb was with his daughter, probably telling her about the new job and the little boy who wanted to be her friend. Somewhere, Dr. Huang was reviewing the notes Sabrina had sent, preparing to integrate an unconventional therapist into a traditional medical framework. Somewhere, the community center was hosting children who needed more resources than they had. And here, in her perfect penthouse filled with expensive furniture and medical equipment and all the trappings of success, Sabrina stood alone except for her sleeping son and realized that wealth wasn't what she'd thought it was. Real wealth was having someone who believed in your child when giving up would be easier. Real wealth was finding a person willing to sacrifice career advancement to keep their daughter safe and loved. Real wealth was discovering that the help you needed had been there all along, quietly working in the background while you were too busy to notice. Sabrina pressed her hand against the cold glass and made herself a promise. She would notice now. She would show up. She would be more than the woman who signed checks and managed logistics from a distance. She would learn to be a mother who believed her son could be more than his diagnosis, even if it terrified her. And she would trust Caleb Reed to help them both find their way there. The night stretched ahead, full of possibility and uncertainty in equal measure. Sabrina embraced both, for the first time in years allowing herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they could build something better than what she'd lost. Not a cure. She was too much a realist for that fantasy. But a life. A real life. Filled with laughter and connection and moments of grace that no amount of money could buy. Starting tomorrow, they would begin. The morning sun cast geometric shadows across Sabrina's office as she reviewed the employment contracts her legal team had drafted overnight. Everything was precise, airtight, professionally worded, exactly what she expected. But as she signed her name beside the compensation figures that would change Caleb Reed's life, she felt an unfamiliar flutter of nervousness. This wasn't a typical hire. This was inviting someone past the walls she'd spent years building. Her assistant knocked softly. "Ms. Vale, Dr. Huang is here for the 9 o'clock. Patricia entered with the brisk efficiency of someone who'd learned to maximize every minute. She set her tablet on Sabrina's desk and pulled up Jace's latest scans without preamble. "I've reviewed Mr. Reed's documentation 3 times. His clinical observations are solid, his progression planning is appropriate, and frankly, the improvement metrics speak for themselves. But we need to establish clear protocols before he starts working with Jace officially. Such as baseline assessments to document Jace's current status, weekly coordination meetings with the full care team, emergency protocols if Jace shows signs of overexertion or muscle damage. And Mr. Reed needs to understand that while his approach has merit, he's working within a medical framework now. His autonomy ends where patient safety begins." Sabrina nodded, appreciating Patricia's directness. He understands that. Made it clear he wants full transparency with the medical team. Good, because the liability issues here are significant. Patricia's expression softened slightly. But so is the potential benefit. Jace has been depressed, Sabrina. Clinically depressed in ways that complicate his physical treatment. If Mr. Reed can address the psychological component while we manage the medical side, we might see improvements we haven't been able to achieve with traditional approaches alone. You think this could actually work? I think it's already working. The question is whether we can sustain it safely and scale it appropriately. Patricia closed her files. When does he start? 2 weeks. He's finishing his notice with the janitorial company. Sabrina hesitated, then asked the question that had kept her awake past midnight. Patricia, am I doing the right thing, hiring someone based on 6 weeks of unauthorized work and a degree that's 8 years old? Are you asking as Jace's mother or as a CEO? Both. Patricia considered this carefully. As a doctor, I'm cautiously optimistic based on documented results. As someone who's watched you struggle with Jace's care for 2 years, I think you're finally listening to your instincts instead of just your fear. That's growth, Sabrina. Don't second guess it now. After Patricia left, Sabrina pulled up the security footage again, not to surveil, but to study. She watched Caleb work with Jace, noting the small details she'd missed before, the way he positioned himself to support without smothering, how he celebrated effort rather than just results, the patience in his voice when Jace struggled, the genuine pride when her son succeeded. She saw what she'd been too blind to recognize. This was what love looked like when it showed up and did the work. Her phone buzzed with a text from the janitorial company manager. Reed's replacement starts Monday. Man's leaving big shoes to fill. Never missed a shift in 3 years. You're lucky to have him. Lucky. The word felt strange applied to her life. Sabrina Vale didn't rely on luck. She relied on strategy, resources, and relentless execution. But somehow this man had appeared exactly when she needed him most, had seen her son when she was too overwhelmed to truly look, had offered help she didn't know to ask for. Maybe that was what grace looked like when you finally stopped trying to control everything. That evening, Sabrina did something she hadn't done in months. She left work at 5 o'clock sharp. Her CFO actually blinked in surprise when she announced she was heading out, and her executive assistant had to confirm twice that yes, Sabrina really meant she was unavailable for evening calls. She arrived home to find Jace on the floor of the living room, surrounded by physical therapy equipment the team had delivered that afternoon. The evening nurse supervised as Jace attempted to stack foam blocks, his small hands trembling with effort. "Mom!" Jace's face lit up when he saw her. "Look, I can almost reach the 4th level." Sabrina set down her briefcase and joined him on the floor, ignoring the protest from her knees and the wrinkles forming in her silk suit. "Show me." She watched Jace concentrate, his tongue poking out slightly as he focused on placing the block. His hand shook, the foam cube wobbling precariously. Sabrina resisted the urge to help, to fix, to control the outcome. Instead, she held her breath and waited. The block settled into place. "I did it!" Jace's triumph was pure and uncomplicated. "You did." Sabrina pulled him into a hug, feeling the delicate framework of his ribs, the fragility that terrified her. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. Caleb says I'm getting stronger every day. He says the muscles remember how to work if we remind them gently." Jace pulled back, his expression turning serious. "Mom, when he comes back, can we do the park thing? Please? I really want to try. I'll talk to Dr. Huang about it tomorrow. But Jace, I need you to understand something." Sabrina chose her words carefully. "The park means being around other kids, and some of them might not understand about your wheelchair. They might ask questions or say things that aren't kind." "Like at school?" Jace's voice went small. "Before you took me out?" Sabrina's chest tightened. She'd pulled Jace from school 6 months ago after a particularly brutal incident where another child had asked if muscular dystrophy was contagious. The teacher had handled it poorly, Jace had come home crying, and Sabrina had made an executive decision to homeschool rather than subject her son to more cruelty. "Yes, like at school," she admitted. "People can be thoughtless when they don't understand. I don't want you to get hurt." "But staying inside all the time hurts too," Jace said quietly. "Just different. Caleb says being safe isn't the same as being alive." The words hit Sabrina like a physical blow. When had her 6-year-old learned to articulate truths that she'd been avoiding? When had protecting him become another way of hiding from her own fear? "You're right," she said softly. "And I'm sorry I forgot that. We'll make the park happen. Safely, with Dr. Huang's approval, but we'll make it happen." Jace threw his arms around her neck, nearly knocking over the block tower in his enthusiasm. "Thank you. Wait until I tell Caleb." "About that." Sabrina smoothed his hair back. "Caleb's starting his new job in 2 weeks. Until then, you won't see him as much. He has responsibilities to finish at his old job, and we want to do this transition right. Can you be patient?" Jace's face fell, but he nodded with the resignation of a child who'd learned early that life rarely bent to his wishes. "Okay, but he's definitely coming back?" "Definitely. I have the signed contract in my briefcase." "Can I see it?" Sabrina retrieved the document, watching Jace's eyes widen at the official letterhead and legal language. He traced Caleb's signature with one finger, his expression reverent. "This means he's really staying," Jace whispered. "Yes, sweetheart. He's really staying." That night, after Jace fell asleep clutching the contract like a talisman, Sabrina found herself doing something else unprecedented. She called her mother. Margaret Vale answered on the 3rd ring, her voice carrying the crisp authority of a woman who'd raised Sabrina to be a warrior in silk suits. "This is a surprise. You never call on weekdays." "I need advice," Sabrina said without preamble. A pause. "What kind of advice?" "The parenting kind." Another longer pause. Then, "Are you feeling well? Should I call your doctor?"
I'm serious, Mother. Sabrina moved to the windows, watching the city lights blur as unexpected tears pricked her eyes. I've made a decision about Jace's care, and I'm not sure if it's brilliant or reckless. She explained about Caleb, the discovery, the confrontation, the offer. Margaret listened without interrupting, a skill she'd perfected during her own corporate career before retirement. When Sabrina finished, her mother said simply, "Do you trust him?" "I barely know him." "That's not what I asked." Sabrina considered the question honestly. "Yes, I trust him with Jace. I've seen the results, reviewed his credentials, watched how my son responds to him. Professionally, it makes sense. And personally? That's the part that scares me." Sabrina's admission came out raw. "I've spent 2 years keeping everyone at arm's length, managing Jace's care like a military operation, because if I just controlled all the variables, I could keep him safe. But this man walked into our lives and did more in 6 weeks than my expensive specialists accomplished in months. What does that say about my judgment?" "It says you're human," Margaret replied. "Sabrina, you've always believed you could solve any problem with enough money and strategic thinking. But some things can't be bought or managed. Sometimes you have to let people in and trust them to care as much as you do. What if I'm wrong? What if he's not who I think he is? What if you're right?" Margaret's voice gentled. "What if this man is exactly who he appears to be? Someone genuinely invested in helping your son. Would that be so terrible?" "It would be terrifying," Sabrina admitted, "because then I'd have to admit I can't do this alone, that I need help." "Darling, needing help isn't weakness, it's wisdom," Margaret sighed. "You've carried this burden by yourself for too long. If this Caleb person is offering to share the weight, let him. And if he turns out to be worth trusting, consider that maybe the universe is finally giving you a break." After they hung up, Sabrina sat in the darkness and let herself feel the full weight of her mother's words. She'd built her entire identity around being the person who didn't need anyone, who solved her own problems, who powered through obstacles with sheer force of will. But will couldn't cure Duchenne. Money couldn't buy back the time she'd lost being absent, and control was just another word for the fear she'd been too proud to acknowledge. Maybe it was time to try something different. The 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Dr. Huang scheduled baseline assessments and coordinated with specialists across disciplines: physical therapy, occupational therapy, psychology, nutrition. Sabrina sat through meeting after meeting, learning medical terminology she'd previously left to the experts, asking questions that revealed how little she actually understood about her son's daily reality. She also made changes to her own schedule, delegating projects she'd previously insisted on handling personally, pushing back on travel that wasn't absolutely critical, and shocking her executive team by announcing she'd be leaving by 6 p.m. every evening going forward. "Is everything okay?" her CFO asked carefully. "This isn't like you." "Everything's fine," Sabrina replied. "I'm just reprioritizing. My son needs me home, so I'm going to be home." She saw the skepticism in her team's faces, the unspoken question of how long this would last before she reverted to her workaholic patterns. Sabrina didn't blame them. She'd trained them to expect her total availability, her relentless focus, her willingness to sacrifice everything for the company. Time to teach them something new. Meanwhile, Caleb completed his transition with the same quiet competence he brought to everything. He trained his replacement personally, left detailed notes about every account, and finished his final shift with the kind of professionalism that made the janitorial manager shake his head in wonder. 3 years, never a complaint, the manager told Sabrina when she called to confirm Caleb's last day. Reliable as sunrise, treated every job like it mattered, from cleaning bathrooms to buffing executive floors. "You got yourself a good man, Ms. Vale. Don't waste him." The words stayed with Sabrina. Don't waste him. As if she had the power to waste or honor someone else's value. As if her treatment of Caleb would reveal something about her own character. On Caleb's first official day, Sabrina had arranged for the full care team to meet in her penthouse conference room, a space she'd designed for virtual board meetings but had never actually used. Dr. Huang arrived first, followed by specialists Sabrina had been paying for months, but rarely interacted with directly: Jennifer Park, the physical therapist;
Marcus Chen, the occupational therapist, and Dr. David Okonkwo, the psychologist who'd been trying unsuccessfully to engage Jace in play therapy. They assembled around the sleek table, their expressions ranging from curious to skeptical. Sabrina understood their uncertainty. She was disrupting an established system, inserting an unknown variable into carefully calibrated treatment protocols. Then Caleb arrived, and the energy in the room shifted.
He wore dark slacks and a button-down shirt, professional but not trying too hard. He carried a messenger bag that Sabrina now knew contained therapy tools he'd made himself, carefully crafted equipment designed for children who needed extra support. And he moved through the space with the same quiet confidence that had first caught her attention, acknowledging each person with genuine respect. "Thank you all for being here," Sabrina began, taking her position at the head of the table. "I know this arrangement is unconventional, but I want us to approach it as a collaboration rather than a disruption. Caleb has demonstrated results with Jace that we haven't achieved through traditional methods alone. The goal today is to understand what he's been doing and how we can integrate it into Jace's existing care plan." Dr. Huang nodded. "Mr. Reed, why don't you walk us through your approach, specifically what you've been doing with Jace and the rationale behind it?" Caleb opened his bag and pulled out the familiar notebook along with several pieces of adapted equipment. "My work with Jace started informally. Conversation, really, not treatment. He was isolating himself, showing signs of depression that concerned me. So I began by just being present, listening without trying to fix anything." "Standard rapport building," Dr. Okonkwo noted. "Go on." As we talked, Jace expressed frustration about his physical limitations. The exercises prescribed by his therapy team were effective medically, but they felt clinical to him, like homework he had to complete. There was no joy in the movement, no sense of accomplishment beyond checking boxes. Jennifer Park shifted uncomfortably. "Physical therapy for Duchenne has to be carefully controlled to avoid muscle damage. Joy isn't always compatible with safety." "I understand that," Caleb said respectfully, "and I'm not suggesting we abandon evidence-based protocols, but I'm suggesting that how we frame the work matters, especially with a 6-year-old child. When therapy feels like punishment for being sick, kids start resisting it. When it feels like play that happens to have therapeutic benefits, they engage differently." He pulled out one of his homemade tools, a colorful fabric tunnel with strategic resistance points built in. "This is an example. Crawling through this tunnel requires the same range of motion and muscle engagement as formal exercises, but to Jace, it's an adventure. He's exploring, not rehabilitating. The outcome is the same, but the psychological impact is completely different." Marcus Chen leaned forward, examining the tunnel with professional interest. "This is clever. The resistance points provide progressive challenge without overwhelming the user. Where did you source this?" "I made it. Fabric from a craft store, resistance bands I already owned, basic sewing skills my wife taught me." Caleb's voice remained steady. "Most of the tools I use are adapted from household items or created from inexpensive materials. Therapy doesn't have to be expensive to be effective." "But it does have to be safe," Dr. Huang interjected. "Walk us through your safety protocols. How do you know when Jace is approaching his limits?" Caleb spent the next 30 minutes detailing his approach, how he monitored breathing patterns, watched for muscle tremors that indicated fatigue, checked in verbally with Jace about pain levels, and documented everything in real time. He described the progressive nature of his exercise selection, explaining how each activity built on previous work without pushing too aggressively. The specialist asked pointed questions, probing for gaps in his knowledge or dangerous assumptions. But Caleb answered each one with the competence of someone who'd done this work before, who understood both the theory and the practical application. Sabrina watched the dynamic shift. The skepticism didn't disappear entirely, but it softened into something more like cautious respect. "I have a question," Dr. Okonkwo said finally. "You mentioned addressing Jace's depression through engagement. Can you elaborate on the psychological approach you've been using?" Caleb's expression grew more animated. "Jace's depression stems from loss of agency and social isolation. He can't control his disease, can't participate in normal childhood activities, and can't connect with peers who don't understand his situation. So my approach focused on restoring a sense of control and providing connection." "How?"
by giving him choices within the therapy framework. Does he want to work on upper body strength or balance today? Does he prefer the resistance tunnel or the modified obstacle course? Small decisions that let him feel like a participant rather than a patient. Caleb pulled out his notebook, and by connecting him with my daughter Lily, who understands what it's like to be different. They haven't met in person yet, but I've been telling Jace stories about her, and he's expressed interest in a friendship. That possibility, having a friend who gets it, has given him something to look forward to. Dr. Okonkwo nodded slowly. Peer support for children with chronic conditions can be incredibly therapeutic. I've been trying to get Jace engaged in group activities, but his mother has been reluctant. All eyes turned to Sabrina. She felt heat rise in her face, but forced herself to meet their gazes steadily. I was afraid he'd be hurt, that other children would be cruel, or that he'd be exposed to illnesses he couldn't fight off. I was protecting him. You were isolating him, Dr. Okonkwo said gently, with good intentions, but the result was the same. Jace needs social interaction with peers, Ms. Vale. His mental health depends on it. I understand that now, Sabrina said quietly, which is why I'm open to arranging for him to meet Caleb's daughter in a controlled environment. Dr. Huang, you mentioned the park might be possible? With supervision and proper precautions, yes. Jace's mobility has improved enough that limited outdoor activity is feasible. Patricia consulted her tablet. We'd need to choose a time when the park isn't crowded, bring his wheelchair for backup, and limit the duration, but I think it could be beneficial both physically and psychologically. Caleb spoke up carefully. Lily has her own challenges with social situations. Autism means she sometimes struggles with unstructured environments, but she's gentle and patient, and she's been excited to meet Jace since I told her about him. I think they might be good for each other. Then let's make it happen, Sabrina decided. This Saturday, if everyone agrees? The team exchanged glances, then nodded in consensus. Jennifer Park spoke up. I'll prepare a mobility plan and safety protocols. Marcus, can you review the park equipment and identify activities that would be appropriate? Absolutely, Marcus agreed. Mr. Reed, I'd like to coordinate with you on the activity selection. Your insights into what engages Jace would be valuable. The meeting continued for another hour, with the team developing an integrated care plan that incorporated Caleb's approaches while maintaining medical oversight. By the time they concluded, Sabrina saw something she hadn't expected: genuine collaboration. These professionals who'd been working in silos were now communicating, building on each other's expertise, finding synergies. And at the center of it was Caleb Reed, the janitor turned therapist who'd somehow become the catalyst for transformation. Mapot. After everyone else left, Caleb lingered. He packed his equipment slowly, his expression thoughtful. That went better than I expected, he said finally. I thought they'd be more resistant to someone coming in from the outside. You won them over, Sabrina replied. Your competence speaks for itself. Or they're willing to try anything that might help Jace. Caleb zipped his bag. Miss Vale, I want to be clear about something. This team knows more about Duchenne than I'll ever know. My value isn't in superior medical knowledge. It's in understanding how a scared 6-year-old experiences his treatment and finding ways to make it less frightening. That's exactly what we need, Sabrina assured him. The medical expertise was already in place. What was missing was someone who saw Jace as a child first and a patient second. Caleb met her eyes. Can I be honest with you about something? Please. I'm terrified I'm going to fail him. The admission came out quietly. Working with Jace informally was different. If something went wrong, I could stop. But now I'm official, part of his care team, and if I make a mistake, then we'll address it together, Sabrina interrupted. That's what a team does, Caleb. You're not carrying this alone anymore. None of us are. Is that what this is? A team? Caleb's expression held something vulnerable. Because, in my experience, wealthy people hire help. They don't collaborate with them. Sabrina felt the observation like a slap, not because it was cruel, but because it was true. She'd treated her staff exactly that way, as interchangeable resources to be managed and directed, not as partners with valuable perspectives. You're right, she said. That's been my approach. But I'm learning it's a limited way to operate, especially when the stakes are this high. So yes, this is a team. And that means I value your input even when it challenges my assumptions. Even when I tell you that you need to show up more? Caleb asked carefully. Because that's what Jace needs most, Ms. Vale. Not more equipment or specialists or treatment protocols. He needs his mother to be present, to believe in him, to fight for his life with the same intensity you fight for your company. The words should have made Sabrina angry, this employee presuming to tell her how to parent, but instead she felt the truth of them settle into her bones. You're right, she said again. I've been absent. Physically here sometimes, but mentally always elsewhere. I told myself I was working for Jace's future, but really I was running from the present because it was too painful to face. It is painful, Caleb said quietly. Watching your child struggle with things other kids take for granted. Knowing there's a timer you can't stop. It's agony, and I understand the impulse to escape into work where you have control. But Jace doesn't need your success, Ms. Vale. He needs your attention. How do you do it? Sabrina asked, the question escaping before she could stop it. How do you show up every day for Lily knowing she'll always struggle? How do you find the strength? Caleb's expression softened with understanding. Because the alternative is letting her face it alone, and I can't live with that. So I choose to believe that every day we have together matters, that every small victory counts, that love is worth the pain of watching someone you adore fight battles you can't fight for them. Tears pricked Sabrina's eyes, actual tears, which she hadn't allowed herself in public for longer than she could remember. I'm afraid I've already lost too much time. That Jace won't forgive me for all the moments I missed. Children are remarkably forgiving when they see genuine effort to change, Caleb said gently. Start showing up now and Jace will meet you where you are. That's what kids do. They give us chances to be better than we were yesterday. Sabrina wiped at her eyes, not caring that her mascara probably looked like hell. Thank you for being honest with me. And thank you for seeing my son when I was too overwhelmed to really look. That's my job now, Caleb replied. Officially. They shared a smile, tentative but real, the beginning of something that might actually become trust. As Caleb left, Sabrina stood at her windows again, but this time the view looked different. The city lights weren't just symbols of power and success. They were homes and families and people fighting their own battles with varying degrees of support and resources. Somewhere out there, Caleb was heading to pick up Lily from school, transitioning from professional therapist back to full-time single father. Somewhere, Dr. Huang was updating Jace's files with the new care plan. Somewhere, children at an underfunded community center were waiting for their Saturday session with teacher Caleb, counting on him to show up. And here, in her penthouse, Jace was building block towers and dreaming about the park, believing for the first time in months that better days might actually come. Sabrina made a decision. She pulled out her phone and sent an email to her executive assistant. Clear my calendar for this Saturday. Family commitment, non-negotiable. Then she walked to Jace's room, where he was supposed to be resting, but was instead drawing pictures with fierce concentration. What you working on, sweetheart? Jace held up his drawing. 2 stick figures in a park, one taller than the other, surrounded by trees and sunshine. It's me and Lily for when we meet on Saturday. I want to give it to her so she knows I'm excited. Sabrina sat on the edge of his bed, studying the simple drawing that contained so much hope it hurt to look at. That's beautiful, Jace. She's going to love it. Do you think she'll like me? The question came out small and worried. I think she'll be lucky to know you, Sabrina said firmly. You're kind and brave and creative. Any friend would be fortunate to have you. Even with the wheelchair? Even with the muscles that don't work right? Sabrina pulled him close, breathing in his little boy's scent, feeling the bird-delicate bones that contained a spirit far stronger than any disease. Especially with those things, because they've taught you empathy and courage that other kids haven't learned yet. You're extraordinary, Jace, not despite your challenges, but including them. Jace nestled against her. Caleb says that too. That different doesn't mean less. Caleb's right, Sabrina said, about a lot of things. They sat together as the evening light faded, mother and son, neither one perfect, but both trying to find their way toward something better than the fear that had ruled them for too long. Saturday would come. The park would either be wonderful or difficult, or some complicated mixture of both.
Caleb's presence in their lives would either prove sustainable or reveal challenges they hadn't anticipated. But for tonight, holding her son and feeling his heartbeat against her chest, Sabrina allowed herself to believe that hope wasn't foolish, that trust wasn't weakness, that the best investment she'd ever make wasn't measured in dollars, but in the moment she chose to be present for. And that sometimes the person who changed your life appeared in the most unexpected packaging, like a janitor with a mystery bag and a heart big enough to see potential where everyone else saw only limitation. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline California sunshine that made everything feel possible. Sabrina woke at 6, her stomach twisted with an anxiety she hadn't felt since her first major investor pitch a decade ago. Except this time, the stakes weren't quarterly profits or market share. This was her son's happiness, fragile and precious, and entirely out of her control. She found Jace already awake, sitting in bed with the drawing he'd made for Lily clutched in both hands. He'd asked to sleep with it under his pillow, like a talisman that might make the meeting go well through sheer force of hope. "Morning, sweetheart," Sabrina said softly from the doorway. "Big day. What if she doesn't like me?" The question spilled out before Jace could contain it, his face tight with worry. "What if I say something wrong, or I can't keep up with her, or she thinks I'm boring?" Sabrina crossed the room and sat beside him, taking the drawing gently from his hands to examine it properly in the morning light. The stick figures were simple but carefully rendered, the trees surrounding them drawn with patient detail. A small dog appeared in one corner, Jace's wishful thinking, since they'd never discussed getting a pet. "Lily's father says she gets nervous about meeting new people too," Sabrina said. "So you'll both be a little scared, which means you're starting from the same place. That's not so bad, is it?" "I guess not." Jace touched the drawing reverently. "Do you think Caleb will really bring her? What if something happens and they can't come?" "Then we'd reschedule," Sabrina assured him, though privately she'd been checking her phone compulsively since waking, half expecting a cancellation text. "But Caleb said they'd be there at 10, and he strikes me as someone who keeps his promises." "He does," Jace said with absolute certainty. "Caleb always does what he says." The trust in her son's voice stirred something complicated in Sabrina's chest. Jace had learned early that adults often disappointed. His father had walked away when the diagnosis got too real. Friends' parents had stopped arranging playdates. Even her own promises to be home more had been broken repeatedly by emergency meetings and last-minute travel. But somehow Caleb had earned a faith that others had squandered. Sabrina wondered what that said about her. They went through the morning routine with careful attention. Breakfast that Jace barely touched, medications administered on schedule, gentle stretches to warm up muscles that had grown stronger over the past weeks, but were still heartbreakingly fragile. The occupational therapist arrived at 8 to help Jace dress in clothes appropriate for the park, soft fabrics that wouldn't irritate if he needed to use the wheelchair for extended periods. By 9:30, they were ready. Sabrina had chosen her own outfit with unusual care, jeans instead of her typical tailored slacks, a simple blouse rather than the armor of designer suits. She wanted to look approachable, like a normal mother taking her son to the park, even though nothing about their situation was normal. The drive to Griffith Park took 20 minutes through light weekend traffic. Sabrina had chosen a smaller playground area that Dr. Huang recommended, one with accessible equipment and enough space that Jace wouldn't feel crowded, but not so isolated that he'd feel exposed. The medical team had provided detailed instructions about sun exposure, hydration breaks, and warning signs that Jace was overexerting himself. They arrived 15 minutes early. Sabrina helped Jace from the car, letting him walk the short distance to the playground while she followed with the wheelchair as backup. His gait was unsteady but determined, each step a small victory that cost more energy than it should. The playground was nearly empty, just an elderly couple on a distant bench and a teenage girl jogging past with headphones. Sabrina had deliberately chosen early Saturday morning for this reason, wanting to minimize variables and potential stressors. She settled on a bench with a clear view of the equipment while Jace stood nearby, gripping the wheelchair handle for support as he scanned the area anxiously. "They're not here yet," he said, his voice small. "It's only 9:50. We're early, remember?" Sabrina checked her phone again. No messages. She told herself that was good news. The minutes stretched. Jace's grip on the wheelchair tightened, his knuckles white with tension.
Sabrina watched a parade of worst-case scenarios march through her mind. Caleb had reconsidered. Lily had panicked. Something had gone wrong, and they weren't coming. She prepared gentle words to soften the disappointment, already planning how to salvage the day so Jace wouldn't internalize another rejection. Then a familiar figure appeared on the path, and everything in Sabrina's chest loosened. Caleb walked toward them with his characteristic steady pace, but he wasn't alone. Beside him, matching his stride with careful concentration, was a little girl with dark curly hair pulled into two puffs, her hand clasped firmly in her father's. She wore purple leggings and a shirt covered in dinosaurs, bright rain boots despite the cloudless sky, and an expression of fierce determination mixed with visible anxiety. Lily. Jace's entire body went rigid with anticipation. Sabrina put a hand on his shoulder, feeling him vibrate with nervous energy. "Remember what we talked about," she murmured. "Let her come to you, no pressure." Caleb and Lily approached slowly, and Sabrina got her first clear look at the girl who'd been such a presence in Caleb's stories. Lily was beautiful in an unconventional way, large dark eyes that missed nothing, a serious expression that made her seem older than 8, and hands that moved constantly, fingers tapping rhythmic patterns against her legs. "Good morning," Caleb said when they reached the bench. His smile was warm but edged with his own tension. "Sabrina, Jace, this is my daughter Lily. Lily, remember we talked about Mr. Jace and his mom, Ms. Sabrina?" Lily didn't make eye contact, her gaze fixed somewhere past Sabrina's left shoulder. Her fingers tapped faster. "Hello?" she said precisely, the word clearly practiced. "It's nice to meet you. That's what people say when they meet." "Hello, Lily," Sabrina replied gently. "Thank you for coming to the park with us." "I like parks," Lily announced to the middle distance, "but not when there are too many people or loud noises. Daddy said this park would be quiet. Is it quiet?" "It's very quiet," Jace offered, his voice shaking slightly. "Just us mostly. I'm Jace. I made you a drawing." He held out the picture with trembling hands, and for a long moment Lily didn't respond. Sabrina saw Caleb's jaw tighten, recognizing the familiar uncertainty of wondering if his daughter would engage or retreat into herself. Then Lily's fingers stilled. Her gaze dropped to the drawing, and something shifted in her expression. "That's me," she said, pointing to one stick figure. "And that's you. We're in the park." "Yeah," Jace breathed. "I drew it for you. You can keep it if you want." Lily took the paper with both hands, holding it carefully like something precious. "I like it. The trees are good. Trees are important for oxygen and shade." She looked up briefly, her eyes landing somewhere near Jace's chin. "Do you want to see my rocks? I brought my rock collection to show you. Daddy said I could bring 3 special ones." "I love rocks," Jace said, which was news to Sabrina, but she didn't contradict. Caleb pulled a small cloth bag from his pocket and handed it to Lily, who settled cross-legged on the ground and began arranging 3 stones in a precise line. Jace lowered himself down beside her with Sabrina's help, his movements awkward but successful. "This one is quartz," Lily explained, touching each stone in turn. "This one is obsidian. It's volcanic glass, very sharp if you break it. And this one is mica schist, which has layers you can see. Do you have rocks?" "I don't collect them," Jace admitted, "but I think they're cool." "Can I touch?" Lily considered this carefully. "Yes, but gently. Rocks are strong, but they can still break if you're not careful." Sabrina exchanged a look with Caleb as their children bent over the stones together, Lily explaining geological properties with the earnest intensity of a professor, while Jace listened with rapt attention. Neither parent spoke, both understanding that this moment was fragile and any adult interference might shatter it. "She practiced for 2 days," Caleb murmured quietly. "What to say? How to share? When it's okay to talk about her special interests without overwhelming someone. She was terrified she'd mess it up." "Jace slept with that drawing under his pillow," Sabrina replied just as softly. "He's been worried Lily would think he's boring or broken." "Lily doesn't see people that way. She sees interesting or not interesting, safe or not safe. Everything else is just details." Caleb watched his daughter with unmistakable tenderness. "And apparently, Jace is interesting." They were. The children talked about rocks for 20 minutes, then moved to the playground equipment under the parents' watchful supervision. Jace showed Lily how he could climb 3 rungs of the ladder before his arms got tired. Lily demonstrated her ability to swing herself higher than seemed safe, pumping her legs with mechanical precision while explaining the physics of pendulum motion. When Jace needed to rest, Lily sat beside him without question, pulling out a sketch pad and drawing elaborate patterns while maintaining a running commentary about symmetry and geometric shapes. When Lily got overwhelmed by a sudden bark from a distant dog, Jace quietly offered her his drawing back as a comfort item until she calmed down. They were different children navigating different challenges, but they shared something fundamental, the understanding that the world wasn't built for bodies and brains like theirs, and that finding someone else who understood made the struggle a little less lonely. Sabrina felt tears prick her eyes and didn't bother to hide them. Beside her, Caleb's expression held the same fierce gratitude and protective love she felt burning in her own chest. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For this, for seeing that Jace needed a friend and making it happen." "Lily needed it too," Caleb replied. "She struggles so much with social connections. Other kids don't understand why she talks about rocks for 45 minutes, or needs to wear rain boots on sunny days, or can't handle surprise changes to plans. They get frustrated or bored or mean." His voice roughened. "But Jace just listens, accepts her exactly as she is. That's a gift I can't pay you back for." "You already have," Sabrina said. "Every day you show up for my son, you're giving us more than money could ever buy." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children discover that friendship didn't require being the same. It just required showing up with honest hearts and accepting what you found there. After an hour, Jace's energy began to flag. Sabrina noticed the telltale signs: shoulders drooping, movements becoming less controlled, the slight tremor in his hands that meant his muscles were approaching their limit. "Jace, sweetheart, let's take a water break," she called gently. "But we're not done playing," Jace protested, though his voice lacked conviction. Lily looked up from her drawing. "Breaks are important. Daddy makes me take breaks when my brain gets too full. Your muscles probably need breaks too." "They do," Jace admitted. "They get tired faster than they used to." "That's okay," Lily said matter-of-factly. "My brain gets tired of people faster than other kids' brains do. Bodies and brains are just different. Different isn't bad." Caleb and Sabrina helped their children to the bench, distributing water bottles and snacks with the practiced efficiency of parents who'd learned to anticipate needs. Jace settled into his wheelchair without complaint, his face flushed with exertion and happiness. "This was the best day ever," he announced. "Lily, can we do this again, please?" Lily didn't answer immediately, her fingers tapping against her water bottle as she processed the question. Finally, she turned to Caleb. "Daddy, can we make this a regular thing? Like my Tuesday therapy is a regular thing?" "If Jace and his mom want to, I think that would be wonderful," Caleb said carefully. "What do you think, Sabrina?" Sabrina looked at her son's hopeful face, at Lily's careful expression, at Caleb's quiet steadiness. She thought about her calendar, about the board meetings and investor calls and strategic planning sessions that had seemed so crucial just weeks ago, and she made a choice that would have been impossible for the woman she was before all of this started. "Every Saturday morning," she said firmly, "same time, same place. We'll make it a tradition." Jace let out a whoop of joy that startled a nearby bird into flight. Lily clapped her hands in her lap, her version of celebration, and began planning out loud what they'd do next week. More rocks to share, drawings to make, maybe trying the slide if Jace felt strong enough. As they packed up to leave, Jace suddenly said, "Lily, I want to tell you something true." Lily paused in organizing her rocks back into their bag. "Okay, I like true things. I have a disease called Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It makes my muscles not work right, and it's going to get worse as I get older. Someday I might not be able to walk at all, and the doctors say—" He swallowed hard, and Sabrina's heart cracked. "They say I probably won't grow up to be an adult, so I want you to know that now, in case it matters." The silence stretched, terrible and fragile. Sabrina started to intervene, to soften the blow or redirect the conversation, but Caleb's hand on her arm stopped her. He shook his head slightly, trusting the moment to unfold. Lily's fingers went still. She looked directly at Jace for the first time all morning, meeting his eyes with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. "That's sad," she said simply. "I don't like that your muscles are broken, but it doesn't matter for being friends. Being friends is about liking someone now, not about how long they're going to be alive." "Right, Daddy?" Caleb's voice was thick. "Right, sweetheart." "My mommy died," Lily continued, still holding Jace's gaze. "Cancer took her when I was 5. I still miss her every day, so I know that sometimes people we love don't get to stay as long as we want them to. But Daddy says that's why we have to love them extra hard while we can. So I'll be your friend extra hard, Jace, for however long we get, okay?" Jace's eyes filled with tears, and he nodded wordlessly. Then, in a gesture that surprised everyone, he reached out and took Lily's hand. She stiffened briefly. Touch was hard for her, Caleb had explained, but after a moment, she squeezed back. "Okay," Jace whispered. "Friends extra hard." Sabrina turned away, unable to watch without completely falling apart. She felt Caleb's presence beside her, solid and understanding, giving her space to feel the overwhelming weight of what their children had just shared. "They're braver than we are," Caleb said quietly. "They've had to be," Sabrina replied, swiping at her eyes. "No one should have to learn these lessons at 6 and 8. "No, but they have learned them, and maybe that means they can teach us something about living with grace instead of fear." They drove home separately, but Sabrina felt less alone than she had in years. That night, Jace talked non-stop about Lily, her rocks, her drawings, her matter-of-fact acceptance of his disease without pity or awkwardness. He fell asleep clutching a smooth piece of quartz Lily had given him as a friendship gift, his face peaceful in a way Sabrina hadn't seen since before the diagnosis. She stood in his doorway and made herself acknowledge the truth she'd been avoiding. Jace was dying. Slowly, progressively, irreversibly. All the money in the world couldn't change that fundamental reality, but money could buy time, could fund research, could provide comfort and support and moments of joy like today. And maybe that was enough, not to cure, but to honor the time they had. Sabrina pulled out her phone and sent an email to her CFO. "I want to establish a foundation focused on Duchenne research and family support services. Schedule a meeting Monday to discuss structure and funding. This is priority 1. Muds. Then she sent a second email to the community center director. "I'd like to discuss a comprehensive funding package to expand your programs for special needs children. Please let me know your availability this week." And finally, she texted Caleb. "Thank you for today, for believing our kids could find each other, for making it happen." His response came quickly. "Thank you for trusting me. See you Monday." 3 simple words that carried weight beyond their surface meaning. See you Monday. Not as employer and employee, not as wealthy client and hired help, but as partners in the shared mission of helping 2 extraordinary children navigate a world that didn't understand them. Sabrina slept that night without the usual nightmares of medical equipment and bad prognoses. Instead, she dreamed of children laughing in sunshine, of ordinary moments made precious by their scarcity, of love measured in presence rather than protocols. The week that followed established new rhythms. Caleb worked with Jace every afternoon, the sessions now officially documented and coordinated with the full medical team. Dr. Huang observed twice, taking notes and offering suggestions that Caleb incorporated with professional grace. The physical therapist admitted, somewhat grudgingly, that his adaptive techniques were producing better engagement than their traditional approaches. But the real changes happened in smaller moments. Sabrina came home every evening by 6, joining therapy sessions and actually participating rather than just observing. She learned the exercises, asked questions, and most importantly, played with her son in ways she'd forgotten were possible. On Tuesday, she arrived to find Caleb and Jace building an elaborate fort from couch cushions, turning gross motor practice into an adventure. She didn't hesitate before kicking off her heels and joining them, becoming the dragon they had to defend against. On Wednesday, she helped Jace write a letter to Lily, carefully forming words with his increasingly steady grip. They talked about friendship and what made people special, and Jace articulated thoughts about acceptance and difference that would have impressed a philosophy professor. On Thursday, disaster struck.
Sabrina was in back-to-back meetings when her phone buzzed with a message from Caleb. Had to stop session early. Jace complained of pain in right leg. Doesn't look like normal fatigue. Called Dr. Huang. Her heart stopped. She excused herself from the conference room, ignoring her CFO's surprise, and called Caleb directly. What happened? The words came out sharper than intended, fear masquerading as anger. We were working on standing balance, Caleb explained, his voice calm but tight. Basic exercise we've done dozens of times. Jace said his right thigh hurt, more than usual. When I checked, the muscle felt wrong. Tighter than it should be, some swelling. I stopped immediately and applied ice, but I think it might be a strain. A strain? Sabrina's medical knowledge was growing, enough to understand the implications. Muscle strains in Duchenne patients were serious. Damaged muscle wouldn't heal properly, could accelerate the disease progression. How bad? I don't know. That's why I called Dr. Huang. Huang. She's sending someone to examine him now. I'm on my way. Sabrina was already grabbing her briefcase, heading for the elevator. Don't let him move. Keep him comfortable. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She made it in 15, traffic laws becoming suggestions in her panic. The penthouse felt different when she burst through the door. The comfortable space they'd created suddenly transformed back into a medical facility, complete with Dr. Huang and Jennifer Park examining Jace's leg while he tried not to cry. Mom! Jace's voice broke when he saw her, relief and fear mixing together. It hurts, and I don't know why. We were just doing normal stuff, and then it hurt so bad. Sabrina went to him immediately, taking his hand while the specialists worked. I know, sweetheart. We're going to figure it out. She caught Caleb's eye across the room. He stood against the wall, his expression carefully neutral, but she could read the guilt and fear beneath the professional mask. This was his worst nightmare, causing harm to the child he'd been trying to help. Dr. Huang straightened, her examination complete. It's a strain in the quadriceps muscle. Not severe, but significant enough that we need to modify activity for the next few weeks while it heals. Jace, this isn't your fault, okay? Sometimes muscles just can't handle stress the way we expect them to. Did I push too hard? Jace asked, tears streaming now. I wanted to be strong for Saturday so Lily would think I was doing good. The confession hit Sabrina like a physical blow. Her son had injured himself trying to impress a friend, pushing past his limits because he'd internalized the message that his worth depended on his physical abilities. Jace, no, she said fiercely, pulling him into a gentle hug that didn't jostle the injured leg. Lily likes you exactly as you are. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. But I want to get better. I want to walk more and be stronger and not be so broken. The words dissolved into sobs, and Sabrina held her son while he cried out frustrations he'd been holding in for too long. Over his head, she saw Dr. Huang gesture for Caleb to follow her out of the room. They left along with Jennifer, giving Sabrina privacy with Jace. She heard voices in the hallway, too quiet to make out words, but the tone was serious. When Jace finally calmed, exhausted from crying and pain medication beginning to take effect, Sabrina settled him in bed with strict instructions not to move. Then she went to find the adults. They were in her home office, the space she rarely used anymore since reorganizing her priorities. Dr. Huang stood with arms crossed, her expression grave. Jennifer looked uncomfortable, and Caleb sat in one of the chairs with his head in his hands. Someone tell me exactly what happened, Sabrina said, closing the door behind her. Dr. Huang spoke first. The strain appears to have occurred during a standing balance exercise that Mr. Reed and Jace have performed successfully multiple times before. Based on Jace's account and Mr. Reed's documentation, there was no obvious error in technique or excessive duration. This was likely just bad luck, a muscle that was already weakened giving out under stress it had previously tolerated. So it's not anyone's fault? Sabrina pressed. Fault is the wrong framework, Dr. Huang replied. Duchenne is progressive. Muscles that work today may fail tomorrow. That's the nature of the disease, but she paused, choosing words carefully. This does raise questions about the sustainability of an aggressive therapy approach. If we're pushing Jace to his limits regularly, we increase the risk of injuries like this. Caleb finally looked up, his face haggard. She's right. I've been so focused on building strength and showing progress that I may have lost sight of the bigger picture.
Jace wanted to improve. I wanted to help him improve, and together we created expectations that his body can't safely meet. That's not what I'm hearing, Sabrina said. I'm hearing that my son's disease is progressing, which we always knew it would, and that sometimes injuries happen despite everyone's best efforts. Ms. Vale, Caleb started. Sabrina, she corrected firmly. We've moved past formality, and I need you to hear me. This wasn't your fault. You've documented every session, coordinated with the medical team, monitored Jace constantly. You've done everything right. The disease did this, not you.
But if I had been more conservative, if I had recognized the signs earlier, then Jace wouldn't have had 6 weeks of being excited about therapy instead of dreading it. He wouldn't have made a friend or felt proud of his progress, or experienced joy and movement for the first time in months. Sabrina moved closer, forcing Caleb to meet her eyes. You gave my son hope. And yes, sometimes hope means reaching for things that turn out to be too far. But the alternative is giving up entirely, and I refuse to accept that. Dr. Huang cleared her throat. Sabrina, I appreciate your support of Mr. Reed, but we do need to reassess the care plan. More conservative approaches, reduced frequency of challenging exercises, perhaps scaling back expectations. No. The word came out flat and absolute. We're not scaling back. We're adjusting based on new information, but we're not retreating into bubble wrap medicine where Jace never tries anything because we're too afraid of what might happen. Your son just got injured, Jennifer pointed out. Surely that warrants more caution. My son just learned that his body has limits he can't predict or control, which is a lesson he needed to learn anyway, Sabrina countered. The question is whether we teach him that lesson means he should stop trying, or whether it means he keeps trying with better awareness and support. I know which message I want him to internalize. Caleb stood, his expression shifting from guilt to something more complex. You're sure about this? Because if we continue and something worse happens, you're going to second-guess this decision. You're going to wonder if I pushed too hard or missed something crucial. And I need to know you trust me enough to remember that we made these choices together, with full knowledge of the risks. Sabrina held his gaze, understanding what he was really asking. He needed to know she wouldn't turn on him when fear inevitably spiked again. That she wouldn't use his background or his lapsed license or his position as ammunition if things went wrong. That this partnership was real, not just convenient. I trust you, she said clearly. Not because you're perfect or because you'll never make mistakes. I trust you because you care about Jace as a person, not just a patient. Because you've proven over and over that his well-being matters more to you than your job security or my approval. That's worth more than any credential or guarantee. Something in Caleb's shoulders loosened, the rigid tension easing. Okay, then we adjust the plan. We incorporate what we learned today. We find the balance between challenge and safety. But we don't give up. We don't give up, Sabrina agreed. They spent the next hour revising the therapy protocols with input from Dr. Huang and Jennifer. More rest days built into the schedule. Better baseline assessments before each session to identify early warning signs of muscle fatigue. A revised progression plan that challenged Jace without pushing to failure. And most importantly, a conversation strategy to help Jace understand his own limits and feel empowered to speak up when something didn't feel right. By the time the meeting ended, Sabrina felt exhausted, but oddly settled. This crisis, Jace's first real injury since starting therapy, had been a test. And instead of fragmenting under pressure, her team had come together, adapted, and emerged stronger. After Dr. Huang and Jennifer left, Caleb lingered. Thank you for defending me in there. You didn't have to. Yes, I did, Sabrina replied. Because it was the truth, and because I'm learning that building trust means standing by people when things go wrong, not just celebrating when they go right. Caleb moved to the window, looking out over the city as Sabrina so often did. Sarah used to say that parents of special needs kids are only as healthy as their support systems. When she got sick, when I became a single father managing Lily's needs alone, I learned how true that was. Having people who believe in you, who don't abandon ship at the first sign of trouble, it makes the impossible feel manageable. You've been that for Jace, Sabrina said, and for me, whether you meant to be or not. Let me return the favor. They stood together in the quiet office,
Two people who'd started as strangers on opposite sides of a vast economic divide, now bound by shared purpose and mutual respect that transcended job titles and bank accounts. Lily asked me last night if Jace's injury meant they couldn't be friends anymore, Caleb said eventually. She worries that if people get hurt, it means she did something wrong. I had to explain that sometimes bodies just fail, that it's nobody's fault, that loving someone means staying even when things are hard. What did she say? She said that made sense because I stayed with Mommy even when cancer made her hurt, so she'll stay with Jace even when his muscles hurt. Caleb's voice roughened. 8 years old and she understands loyalty better than most adults I know. She learned from a good teacher, Sabrina observed. So did your son. Jace's first concern when I told him we had to stop the exercise wasn't about his pain. It was whether this meant he couldn't see Lily on Saturday. He was more worried about disappointing her than about being injured. Sabrina felt her throat tighten. Can he still see her? Dr. Huang said rest, but she cleared him for gentle activity. No running or climbing, but sitting together at the park should be fine. Might actually be good for his mental state. Caleb turned from the window. If you're comfortable with it. I'm comfortable, Sabrina decided. Jace needs normalcy and friendship more than he needs sterile protection. We'll make it work. That Saturday, they returned to the park with modifications. Jace came in his wheelchair, his injured leg elevated, but his face lit up the moment he saw Lily approaching with Caleb. The little girl carried a shoebox that she immediately presented to Jace with ceremonial gravity. I made you a healing box, she announced. Daddy said your leg hurts, so I put things in here that help when you're hurt. There's a smooth rock for holding when pain is bad, a picture I drew of us being friends, a stress ball shaped like a dinosaur for squeezing, and my special bracelet that Mommy gave me before she died because it's the most powerful healing thing I own. Jace opened the box with trembling hands, his eyes filling with tears as he examined each item. Lily, this is the best present anyone ever gave me, but I can't take your mommy's bracelet. That's too important. That's why I'm sharing it, Lily said simply. Important things should be shared with friends when they need extra help. You can borrow it until your leg is better, then give it back. That's what friends do. Sabrina watched her son fasten the worn beaded bracelet around his wrist with reverent care. Beside her, Caleb stood with his hands in his pockets, his expression suspended between pride and heartbreak. She's never shared that bracelet with anyone, he murmured. Not with me, not with her grandparents, not with her therapists. That's her most precious possession. Our children are teaching us something, Sabrina said quietly, about what really matters when you strip away everything else. They spent the morning at the park, different from the previous week, but no less precious. The children sat together on a blanket, Lily drawing while Jace worked on fine motor skills with therapy putty, their quiet companionship more healing than any medical intervention. And Sabrina sat beside Caleb on the bench, two parents watching their extraordinary children navigate a world that would always be harder for them than it should be, finding in each other's presence a kind of solidarity that defied simple categorization. This wasn't employer and employee, wasn't client and service provider, wasn't even just allies in a shared mission. This was family, forming in unexpected ways, built on foundation of trust and shared struggle and the revolutionary act of showing up for each other when it would be easier to walk away. The muscle strain healed slowly over the next 3 weeks, but something else was healing faster. The distance Sabrina had built between herself and the life happening right in front of her. She found herself checking her phone less during therapy sessions, actually listening when Caleb explained the reasoning behind each exercise modification, asking questions that weren't about timelines or metrics, but about how Jace experienced the work. She was learning to be present, and it was harder than closing any business deal she'd ever negotiated. On a Tuesday evening in late October, Sabrina arrived home to find Caleb sitting alone in the living room, his expression troubled. Jace was with the evening nurse, already settled for bed, which meant this conversation was meant to happen without her son overhearing. What's wrong? Sabrina asked, setting down her briefcase with practiced quiet. Caleb gestured to the chair across from him. We need to talk about Jace's progress, or more accurately, the lack of it. Sabrina's stomach dropped. His leg is healing well, Dr. Huang said. The leg is fine, Caleb interrupted gently. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the bigger picture, about what's happening with his overall condition. He pulled out his ever-present notebook, but this time the pages he showed her didn't contain celebrations of incremental victories. Instead, she saw careful documentation of decline, grip strength measurements trending downward, increased fatigue during basic activities, range of motion slowly decreasing despite consistent therapy. This is from the past month, Caleb explained, his voice professionally neutral in a way that made Sabrina's chest constrict. When I account for the recovery time from the strain, we're still seeing regression in areas we haven't directly impacted. Jace is getting weaker, Sabrina. The disease is progressing. We knew it would progress, Sabrina said, but the words felt hollow. That's the nature of Duchenne, progressive muscle deterioration. You told me yourself we can't cure it, just slow it down. And we have slowed it in some areas. The emotional and psychological benefits are undeniable, but I need you to understand what's coming. Caleb leaned forward, his expression intense. In the next few months, Jace is going to lose more independence. The wheelchair will become necessary, not just backup. Simple tasks like dressing himself or using the bathroom will require assistance. His world is going to get smaller in ways that all the therapy and positive attitude can't prevent. Sabrina felt the familiar panic rising, the sense that she was standing on sand that kept shifting beneath her feet no matter how hard she tried to find solid ground. So what are you saying? That we should give up? Stop the therapy because it's not fixing everything? No. Caleb's response was immediate and firm. I'm saying we need to shift our goals. We've been focused on building strength and reclaiming abilities. Now we need to focus on maintaining quality of life and helping Jace navigate loss with dignity and support. He's 6 years old. How is a 6-year-old supposed to navigate loss with dignity? The question came out raw, all the fear and frustration Sabrina had been containing for weeks spilling over. With help from adults who love him enough to be honest about what's happening and present enough to walk through it with him, Caleb said quietly. Sabrina, I know this isn't what you want to hear. I know you want me to tell you that if we just work harder or find the right combination of therapies, we can turn this around. But that's not the reality we're dealing with. Then what the hell have we been doing? Sabrina stood abruptly, needing to move, to do something with the energy coursing through her. What was the point of all this? The therapy? The hope? The Saturday mornings at the park? If it doesn't actually change anything, it changes everything, Caleb said with quiet force. Jace is happy. He has a friend. He looks forward to our sessions instead of dreading them. He's learning that his value isn't dependent on what his body can do. That's not nothing, Sabrina. That's everything that actually matters when you're facing the unfaceable. Sabrina pressed her palms against the cool glass of the window, staring out at the city lights blurred by unshed tears. I thought if I just controlled the variables, managed the care properly, threw enough resources at the problem. You could save him, Caleb finished. I know. I felt the same way when Sarah got sick. Researched every treatment, consulted with specialists across the country, maxed out credit cards for experimental therapies, and in the end, cancer didn't care about my determination or our savings account. It took her anyway. How did you survive it? The question escaped before Sabrina could stop it. How did you watch someone you loved die and not break completely? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. I didn't have a choice about whether it would break me. It did break me. Shattered me into pieces I wasn't sure I could put back together. But I had Lily, and she needed me functional, so I learned to rebuild around the broken places instead of pretending they weren't there. I don't know how to do that. Sabrina's admission was barely a whisper. You're already doing it, Caleb said. Every time you come home instead of staying late at work. Every time you sit on the floor with Jace instead of hovering at a distance. Every time you choose presence over protection. You're rebuilding, Sabrina. You just don't recognize it yet because it doesn't look like strength is supposed to look. A sound from the hallway made them both turn. Jace stood in the doorway in his pajamas, Lily's bracelet still on his wrist, his expression far too knowing for a 6-year-old. I heard you talking, he said quietly, about me getting sicker. Sabrina's heart stopped. Sweetheart, you should be in bed. Let's get you settled and... I already know, Mom. Jace's voice was steady in a way that broke her. I know the disease is winning. I can feel it. My arms get tired faster than they used to. My legs don't always do what I tell them. I'm not stupid. Caleb stood and moved to Jace's level, kneeling so they were eye to eye. You're right. You're not stupid. You're incredibly perceptive and brave, and you deserve to be part of conversations about your own life. I'm sorry we were talking without including you. Are we going to stop doing therapy? Jace asked, fear creeping into his voice. Because if I'm getting worse anyway, maybe there's no point. Is that what you want? Caleb asked gently. To stop? Jace considered the question with visible concentration. No. I like our time together, and I like being stronger than I would be if we didn't try, even if it's not as strong as before. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, Caleb assured him, and that's exactly what we'll keep doing. The work changes as you change, but we don't quit unless you want to quit. Sabrina joined them on the floor, pulling Jace into her lap with careful attention to his positioning. He settled against her chest, small and fragile and carrying burdens no child should have to carry. I'm scared, Jace whispered, about what happens when I can't walk at all, about needing help with everything, about people looking at me like I'm already gone. I'm scared too, Sabrina admitted, the words sticking in her throat. I'm terrified that I won't be strong enough or wise enough or present enough to help you through what's coming. But Jace, I promise you this. You will never face any of it alone. Whatever happens, however hard it gets, I'm here. Caleb's here, Lily's here, we're all here, and we're not leaving. Even when I can't do anything by myself anymore, Jace's voice was so small. Especially then, Caleb said firmly, because needing help doesn't make you less valuable or less lovable. It just makes you human. We all need help sometimes, buddy. Some of us just need it more obviously than others. They sat together on the floor until Jace's breathing deepened with sleep. Sabrina carried him to bed, tucking him in with the kind of tender care she'd shown when he was a baby, before the diagnosis, when the future still seemed limitless and bright. When she returned to the living room, Caleb was still there, waiting. Thank you for being honest with me, Sabrina said. About the progression. I needed to hear it, even though it hurts. Honesty is all I have to offer, Caleb replied. I can't fix Jace. I can't slow the disease significantly. All I can do is help him have the best possible quality of life for whatever time we get. And help you learn to live with uncertainty instead of constantly fighting it. Is that what you did? After Sarah died? Eventually. Not at first. At first I raged against every unfairness, questioned every decision I'd made, tortured myself with what-ifs. Caleb's expression grew distant with memory. But Lily needed me present, not drowning in grief and guilt. So I learned to carry both, the sadness and the joy, the loss and the love. They exist together, and that's okay. I don't know if I'm capable of that kind of acceptance, Sabrina admitted. You don't have to accept it all at once. Just take it one day at a time, one moment at a time. Caleb stood, preparing to leave for the night. And lean on your people, Sabrina. That's what they're there for. After he left, Sabrina found herself calling her mother again. Margaret answered with her typical efficiency. Twice in 1 month. Should I be worried? Probably, Sabrina said, surprising herself with a laugh that held more tears than humor. Mother, I need to tell you something I've never said out loud before. I'm listening. I'm not going to be able to save Jace. No matter what I do, how much money I spend, how perfectly I manage his care, he's still going to die. Probably before he turns 20, maybe sooner. The words came out in a rush like poison she'd been holding in too long. And I don't know how to live with that. Margaret was silent for a beat, then, Oh, darling, come here. I can't just leave. Jace is Sabrina Elizabeth Vale. Get on a plane tomorrow morning. I'll arrange for nursing coverage overnight. You need to come home. Beverly Hills is my home, Sabrina protested weakly. No, Margaret said firmly. Beverly Hills is where you work. Home is where people love you enough to hold you while you fall apart. Come to Santa Barbara. Let me help you. Sabrina found herself nodding even though her mother couldn't see it. Okay, I'll come. She made arrangements with the nursing service, briefed Caleb on the change in schedule, and by 10 the next morning was driving up the coast to her mother's estate overlooking the Pacific. The 2-hour journey gave her time to think, to feel, to stop running from the grief that had been chasing her since Jace's diagnosis. Margaret met her at the door, 70 years old and still formidable, her silver hair perfectly styled, her embrace surprisingly strong. She didn't ask questions or demand explanations. She simply led Sabrina to the sunroom overlooking the ocean and let her daughter cry until there were no tears left. "I've failed him," Sabrina finally said, her voice hoarse. "All my success, all my power, all my money, and I can't give Jace the one thing that actually matters. I can't give him more time." "No, you can't," Margaret agreed. "But you can give him something arguably more valuable. You can give him a mother who shows up, who loves him without reservation, who makes the time he has beautiful instead of desperately trying to extend a timeline you can't control." "That doesn't feel like enough." "Because you've spent your entire life measuring value in outcomes and achievements," Margaret said bluntly. "But love isn't measured that way, Sabrina. Love is measured in presence, in attention, in the willingness to stay even when staying is the hardest thing you've ever done." They talked for hours, about Jace, about the disease, about Caleb and Lily, and the unexpected family forming in the spaces between heartbreak. Margaret listened without judgment, offered perspective without platitudes, and reminded Sabrina that strength sometimes looked like admitting you couldn't fix everything. "This Caleb," Margaret said as afternoon shadows lengthened. "Tell me more about him." Sabrina found herself describing not just his professional skills, but the way he saw people, the patience he brought to impossible situations, the quiet dignity in how he'd rebuilt his life after devastating loss. "You care about him," Margaret observed, "as more than just Jace's therapist." "I respect him," Sabrina corrected, but the words felt incomplete. "Sabrina, I've known you for 38 years. I can tell when you're lying to yourself." Margaret's expression gentled. "It's okay to develop feelings for someone who shows up for your child with genuine care. It's okay to notice when a good man treats you with kindness and respect. It doesn't make you weak or distracted from Jace. It makes you human." "He's my employee," Sabrina protested. "It would be inappropriate crossing professional boundaries." "He's a partner in the most important work of your life," Margaret interrupted. "And boundaries exist to protect people, not to prevent connection. If you've found someone who understands what you're facing and makes the burden lighter, don't dismiss that just because it doesn't fit your preconceived notions of how things should be." Sabrina sat with that thought during the drive back to Beverly Hills, during the quiet hours after she arrived home to find Jace sleeping peacefully, during the morning when Caleb showed up for their regular session. She watched him work with Jace with new eyes, noticing details she'd been too busy managing to see before. The way his whole face softened when Jace succeeded at a difficult task. How he never showed frustration when Jace struggled, just adjusted his approach and tried again. The unconscious care in how he positioned himself to support without smothering, protect without hovering. And she noticed other things too. The breadth of his shoulders under simple shirts he wore because he couldn't afford designer labels. The quiet competence in hands that had learned to be gentle despite their size. The intelligence in eyes that had seen too much loss but somehow still held hope. When the session ended and Jace went with the nurse for his bath, Sabrina asked Caleb to stay. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, settling into the chair across from him. "About shifting goals and accepting what we can't control. You're right. I've been so focused on outcomes that I've missed the point of the work we're doing." "You're learning," Caleb said generously. "That's all any of us can do." "I want to ask you something personal, and you can absolutely say no." Sabrina took a breath. "How do you do this? How do you show up every day for Jace knowing how this story ends? How do you invest in a child you know you're going to lose?" Caleb was quiet for a long moment, his expression reflective. "Because the alternative is worse. If I protect myself by staying distant, by treating Jace as just another client, then I make his short life lonelier. And I diminish my own humanity in the process. So I choose to love him anyway, to invest anyway, to show up anyway, even though it's going to hurt like hell when he's gone." "That's incredibly brave." "It's incredibly necessary," Caleb corrected. "Love isn't brave. It's just what we do for people who matter, regardless of how long we get to keep them." Sabrina felt something shift in her chest. A recognition, an acknowledgement of what she'd been avoiding naming. "You matter," she said quietly. "Not just what you do for Jace, but you, as a person. You matter to me. Caleb's expression changed, surprise and something more complex flickering across his features. Sabrina, I'm not saying this to make things awkward or to change our professional relationship, she continued quickly. I just wanted you to know that I see you, not just as the therapist or the employee or the help. I see you as someone who's made an impossible situation bearable through your presence and your honesty and your willingness to show up even when it's hard. That deserves to be acknowledged. Thank you, Caleb said, his voice rougher than usual. That means more than you know. But Sabrina, I need to be clear about something. I can't be more than what I am right now. My capacity is maxed out between Jace and Lily and trying to rebuild some kind of career stability. I don't have room for complications. I'm not asking for complications, Sabrina assured him, even as disappointment flickered through her. I'm just acknowledging what's true. We can leave it at that. They did leave it at that, but something had been said that couldn't be unsaid. An honesty introduced into the space between them that changed the texture of their interactions in subtle ways. Over the next 2 weeks, Jace's decline became more noticeable. He needed help with tasks he'd been managing independently just a month before. The wheelchair transitioned from occasional support to constant companion. His energy flagged earlier in the day, requiring more rest periods and shorter activity windows. But he remained cheerful, perhaps more so because of Lily's constant presence in his life. They talked on video calls between park sessions, Lily showing him her latest rock finds or drawings, while Jace shared stories about therapy successes and setbacks. Their friendship had deepened into something that transcended typical childhood bonds, a connection forged by shared understanding of what it meant to navigate a world not built for bodies and minds like theirs. On a Saturday morning in early November, they gathered at the park as usual. Jace remained in his wheelchair throughout, his energy too depleted for even the gentle walking they'd attempted in previous weeks. But Lily didn't seem to notice or care. She settled on the ground beside his chair, arranging her rocks in elaborate patterns while maintaining a running commentary about geological formations. Sabrina and Caleb sat on their customary bench, watching the children with the bittersweet awareness that moments like this were becoming more precious as they grew more limited. I got the community center funding approved, Sabrina said, needing to fill the silence with something practical. The board unanimously supported the proposal. We'll be able to expand programs, hire professional staff, and provide scholarships for families who can't afford services. That's incredible, Caleb said, genuine gratitude in his voice. Those kids will have opportunities they never would have had otherwise. Thank you for making that happen. It's what Jace would want, Sabrina replied, to know that his struggle meant something beyond just his own experience, that other children might benefit from what we've learned. You're thinking about legacy, Caleb observed quietly. I'm thinking about making sure that when... Sabrina couldn't finish the sentence. I'm thinking about what comes after. How to honor what Jace's life meant. How to make sure he's not just a tragedy, but a catalyst for positive change. Caleb reached over and took her hand. A simple gesture of solidarity that felt more intimate than it probably should have. He's already more than a tragedy, Sabrina. He's a child who taught his mother how to be present, who showed a lonely therapist that taking risks on connection is worth the inevitable pain, who gave my daughter her first real friend. That's a legacy that matters, regardless of how long he's here. Sabrina squeezed his hand, not trusting her voice. They sat like that for several minutes, connected by shared grief and determination, watching their children build something beautiful in the shadow of loss. Then Jace called out, "Mom, Caleb, come see what Lily made." They joined the children to find an elaborate rock mandala arranged on the ground, circles within circles, each stone carefully selected for color and size, the pattern somehow both chaotic and perfectly ordered. It's called a healing circle, Lily explained seriously. In some cultures, people make these when someone is sick. The rocks carry wishes for the person to feel better. I put my best rocks in here for Jace, and now he sits in the middle and receives all the healing energy. She looked at her father for confirmation. That's how it works, right, Daddy? The rocks help? Caleb's voice was thick. That's exactly how it works, sweetheart. The love you put into choosing each rock and arranging them, that's real healing magic. Sabrina helped Jace position his wheelchair in the center of the circle, watching her son's face glow with the simple joy of being seen and celebrated by his friend. Lily stood and placed her hands on the armrests of his chair, looking at him with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. "I wish you didn't have to hurt," she said simply. "I wish I could make the bad muscles go away. But since I can't, I made you this circle to remember that even when your body doesn't work right, you're still perfect to me, okay?" Jace nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Okay. Thank you, Lily. This is the best present anyone ever gave me, even better than the healing box." They stayed in the park until Jace's energy finally gave out completely, until his eyes drooped with exhaustion that no amount of determination could overcome. Sabrina lifted him from the wheelchair with practiced ease, carrying him to the car while Caleb packed up their belongings. "Same time next week?" Jace asked drowsily from Sabrina's arms. "Same time next week," Caleb confirmed. "Lily's already planning what rocks to bring." As they drove home, Jace fell asleep in the back seat, and Sabrina found herself gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. The disease was stealing her son piece by piece, and all the money and resources and determination in the world couldn't stop it. But today, for a few hours, Jace had been happy, had felt loved, had experienced the simple grace of friendship freely given. Maybe Caleb was right. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. That night, after Jace was settled and sleeping, Sabrina stood at her windows and let herself cry. Not the controlled, silent tears she usually allowed, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place she'd kept locked away for too long. She cried for the future Jace would never have, for the mother she'd been too busy to be when time wasn't so obviously limited, for the simple unfairness of a disease that stole children with methodical cruelty. And she cried because, for the first time since the diagnosis, she was allowing herself to feel the full weight of what was coming, instead of hiding behind busy schedules and managed expectations. Her phone buzzed with a text from Caleb. "You okay? I know today was hard." She typed back through blurred vision. "No, but I will be. Thank you for asking." His response came quickly. "You don't have to be okay alone. That's what community is for. Call if you need to talk." Sabrina almost did call, almost reached out for the support he was offering, but old habits were hard to break, and asking for help still felt like admitting defeat. So instead, she stood at the window and practiced what Caleb had taught her through example, staying present with pain instead of running from it, acknowledging feelings instead of managing them away, accepting that some burdens couldn't be carried alone even if you desperately wanted to prove you could. Tomorrow, she would be strong again, would show up for Jace with the presence and attention he deserved, would continue building the foundation of love and support that would carry them both through whatever came next. But tonight, she let herself be broken, because sometimes breaking open was the only way to make room for healing. The breaking open Sabrina had allowed herself that night turned out to be not an ending, but a beginning. She woke the next morning with swollen eyes and a strange sense of lightness, as if crying out the grief she'd been hoarding had made room for something else to grow. She found Jace already awake, working with Caleb on morning stretches that had become gentler over the weeks, adapted to a body that required increasingly more support and less challenge. But her son's face held the same determined concentration it always did, and when he successfully completed a sequence that would have been trivial for most children but was monumental for him, his smile could have powered the city. "Mom, did you see? I did the whole thing without stopping." Jace's pride was incandescent. "I saw, sweetheart. You were amazing." Sabrina joined them on the floor, no longer caring about wrinkled suits or the optics of a CEO sitting cross-legged on carpet. What's next? Over the following weeks, a new rhythm established itself. Sabrina restructured her entire company leadership, promoting her COO to handle day-to-day operations, while she shifted to a strategic advisory role that required minimal travel and flexible hours. Her board initially resisted until she made it clear this wasn't a request. This was the new reality, and they could either support it or find a new CEO. They supported it. She spent mornings with Jace, participating in therapy sessions instead of just observing. Caleb taught her the exercises, the positioning, the subtle signs that indicated Jace needed rest or was pushing too hard. She learned to read her son's body the way she'd once read market trends, applying the same focused intelligence to understanding his needs. Afternoons were for work, but she was home by 4 every day without exception. Evenings belonged to Jace, reading together, watching movies, talking about everything and nothing. The nights when Jace's pain was bad, she sat with him through the hours, holding his hand and telling him stories about the father he barely remembered, painting a picture of a man who'd loved him, even if that love hadn't been strong enough to stay. And through it all, Caleb was there, professional and competent, but also increasingly woven into the fabric of their daily lives in ways that transcended his job description. He brought Lily by for midweek visits when Jace's energy was too depleted for park outings. He coordinated with the medical team with the precision of a conductor leading an orchestra. He pushed back when Sabrina's old controlling instincts resurfaced, reminding her gently but firmly that presence mattered more than perfection. "You're doing it again," he said one afternoon when Sabrina was researching experimental treatments on her laptop instead of watching Jace draw. "Managing instead of being." "I'm just looking at options," Sabrina defended. "There's a new trial in Germany that Jace doesn't qualify for because his condition is too advanced," Caleb interrupted. "Dr. Huang already reviewed it. You're chasing solutions because accepting that there aren't any feels impossible. I get it. But Jace doesn't need you to find a cure right now. He needs you to look at what he's drawing." Sabrina closed the laptop and moved to see Jace's artwork, a crayon rendering of 4 people holding hands under a bright sun. 2 tall figures, 2 small ones, all smiling. "That's us," Jace explained. "You, me, Caleb, and Lily. That's our family." The word landed like a depth charge in Sabrina's chest. Family. Not the family she'd planned or the family she'd lost, but the one that had assembled itself in the spaces between crisis and care, built on foundations of shared struggle and genuine affection. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice unsteady. "Can I keep it?" "It's for you," Jace said simply. "So you remember that we're not alone. None of us are." That drawing went up on Sabrina's office wall, not in the penthouse, but in her corporate headquarters, where colleagues and clients could see it. When people asked about it, she told them the truth. It was her son's reminder that success wasn't measured in quarterly earnings, but in who showed up when things got hard. The responses varied. Some people got uncomfortable, changing the subject quickly. Others shared their own stories of loss and struggle, creating unexpected moments of connection. And a few asked how they could help, which led to the Duchenne Research Foundation expanding faster than Sabrina had anticipated. By mid-December, the foundation had raised significant funding, recruited top researchers, and established support networks for families navigating the disease. Sabrina threw herself into the work with the same intensity she'd once reserved for corporate acquisitions. But this time the motivation wasn't profit, it was purpose. "You're building something good here," Caleb observed one evening after a foundation board meeting held in Sabrina's penthouse. "Something that will outlast any of us." "It's what Jace deserves," Sabrina replied. "A legacy that means his life mattered beyond just our small circle." "His life already matters beyond that," Caleb said. "Look at how you've changed, how your company culture is shifting because you're modeling different priorities, how the community center is thriving because you funded it, how Lily has confidence she never had before because Jace taught her that being different doesn't mean being less. That's impact, Sabrina. Real impact." She wanted to argue, to diminish the compliment the way she always had, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the sincerity in Caleb's eyes. Maybe it was the exhaustion of constantly deflecting genuine regard. Or maybe it was just that she was learning to accept kindness the way Jace had learned to accept help, with grace instead of resistance. "Thank you," she said simply, "for seeing that, for seeing me." Caleb held her gaze a moment too long, something shifting in the air between them. Then Jace called from his bedroom, needing help with his medication, and the moment passed. But it lingered. Christmas approached with the kind of forced cheer that felt obscene given their circumstances. Sabrina had never been particularly festive, and this year the holiday felt like a cruel reminder that Jace's remaining celebrations were finite and counting down. But Jace wanted Christmas, wanted the tree and the lights and the traditions of normalcy, so Sabrina made it happen. Caleb helped her decorate, transforming the sterile penthouse into something warm and inviting. Lily came over to make ornaments with Jace, the 2 children sitting together surrounded by craft supplies, while Sabrina and Caleb supervised from a careful distance. "Next year, I might not be able to do this," Jace said suddenly, his voice matter-of-fact rather than sad. "My hands are getting weaker, so I want to make extra ornaments this year, enough for lots of Christmases, so you'll always have them." Lily nodded seriously. "That's good planning. I'll help you make strong ones that won't break easily. We can use extra glue." They worked together with focused intensity, creating a collection of ornaments that ranged from beautiful to charmingly lopsided. Jace labeled each one with shaky handwriting. For Mom, Christmas 2024. For Caleb, from your buddy Jace. For Lily, best friend forever. Sabrina watched her son prepare for his own absence with a maturity that should have been impossible at 6 years old, and she felt something fundamental shift. This was it. This was what Caleb had been trying to teach her, that loving someone meant honoring their experience, their timeline, their way of processing the impossible. Jace knew he was dying, had probably known for longer than any of them realized, and instead of protecting him from that knowledge, their job was to walk beside him through it with honesty and presence. On Christmas Eve, they gathered for dinner, Sabrina, Jace, Caleb, and Lily. It wasn't planned as anything significant, just a casual meal, but it felt momentous in ways Sabrina couldn't quite articulate. They sat around her dining table that had rarely been used, eating food Caleb had cooked because Sabrina's culinary skills peaked at reservations, laughing at Lily's detailed explanation of holiday traditions across different cultures. After dinner, Jace asked if they could all sleep in the living room together like a sleepover. "Please, Mom, I know it's weird, but I want everyone together, just for tonight." Sabrina looked at Caleb, who shrugged with a small smile. "If you're comfortable with it, we're in." They constructed an elaborate blanket fort using every pillow and cushion in the penthouse. The children claimed the center, while the adults positioned themselves on either side, close enough to supervise but far enough to give the kids space. They watched Christmas movies until Jace and Lily fell asleep, tangled together like puppies, exhausted from joy and sugar. In the darkness, with just the glow of Christmas lights illuminating the space, Caleb spoke quietly. "This is the best Christmas I've had since Sarah died. Thank you for including us." "You're family now," Sabrina replied, the word coming easier this time. "You and Lily both. I know we didn't plan it this way, but here we are." "Here we are," Caleb echoed. Then, carefully, "Sabrina, I need to tell you something." Her heart rate picked up. "Okay?" "I'm falling for you, have been for weeks, maybe longer." Caleb's confession was quiet but steady. "I know the timing is terrible and the circumstances are complicated, and I'm technically your employee. I know all the reasons this is a bad idea, but I need you to know that what I feel isn't just gratitude or proximity or shared trauma. It's real." Sabrina's breath caught. "Caleb, you don't have to respond," he continued. "I'm not asking for anything to change, but I've learned that life is too short and too uncertain to leave important things unsaid. So I'm saying it. I see you, Sabrina Vale. Not the CEO or the wealthy client or Jace's mother. I see the woman who's learning to be vulnerable, who shows up even when it's terrifying, who's rebuilding herself into someone braver than she knew she could be. And I'm falling in love with that woman." Sabrina felt tears prick her eyes, the easy tears that had become familiar since she'd stopped fighting against feeling everything. "I see you too. The man who gave my son hope when I'd forgotten how. Who shows up with patience and wisdom and a kind of strength I didn't know existed. Who makes me want to be better than I was." "So what do we do with that?" Caleb asked. "I don't know," Sabrina admitted. "I just know I don't want to pretend it's not there. Don't want to hide behind professionalism or appropriate boundaries when we've already blown past those into something more real." They didn't kiss, didn't move closer or make promises about the future. But they sat in the acknowledgement of what was growing between them, letting it exist without needing to define or control it. The next morning, Christmas unfolded with surprising joy. Jace opened presents with the uninhibited excitement of a child who'd learned to treasure moments rather than things. Lily received a collection of geological specimens that made her literally squeal with delight, the first time Caleb had heard that sound from his daughter in years. And when Jace gave Sabrina her gift, a coupon book of promises he could still keep, things like 1 hug, one smile, one "I love you," she cried openly, not caring who saw. "These are the best presents I've ever received," she told her son, pulling him into a careful embrace. "They're all I have to give," Jace said simply, "but they're real. They're perfect." January brought new challenges. Jace's mobility decreased significantly, and tasks that had required minimal assistance now needed substantial support. The wheelchair became permanent. Breathing grew more labored. Pain increased despite careful medication management. But through it all, their chosen family held steady. Caleb adapted therapy to focus on comfort rather than improvement. Lily visited even when Jace was too tired to talk, sitting beside his bed and drawing while maintaining a soothing monologue about rocks and science and friendship. Sabrina learned to advocate fiercely with the medical team while also accepting the limits of what medicine could do. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the relationship between Sabrina and Caleb shifted from acknowledged attraction to something deeper. It happened in small moments, hands held during difficult doctor's appointments, late-night conversations after the children slept, shared glances that communicated understanding without words. One evening in February, after Jace and Lily were both asleep in Jace's room, Caleb found Sabrina on her balcony, staring at the city lights with an expression he'd learned to recognize as her processing face. "Penny for your thoughts," he offered, joining her at the railing. "I'm thinking about how different my life looks now compared to 6 months ago," Sabrina said. "How terrifying and beautiful that transformation has been." "Regrets?" "About the past, yes. About the time I wasted being absent. But about now? About us?" She turned to face him fully. "No regrets at all." Caleb cupped her face gently, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. When he kissed her, it was sweet and careful, and full of all the feelings they'd been dancing around for months. "I love you," Sabrina said when they pulled apart. "I don't know what the future holds or how we navigate this with everything else happening, but I needed you to know." "I love you too," Caleb replied. "And we'll figure it out the same way we figured everything else out, together, one day at a time." They told the children the next morning over breakfast, unsure how they'd respond. Jace's reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. "Does this mean Caleb is going to be my dad?" "It means we care about each other very much," Sabrina said carefully, "and that our family is growing in new ways. Is that okay with you?" "It's perfect," Jace said with absolute certainty. "I always wanted a dad, and Caleb's the best one I could ask for." Lily's response was more reserved but equally clear. "Does this mean Jace's mom is like a mom to me too?" Caleb looked at Sabrina, the question implicit. She felt her chest constrict with fierce protectiveness and love for this brilliant, unusual child who'd become so important to her. "If you want that, then yes," Sabrina said. "I'd be honored to be a mom person for you, Lily." Lily considered this carefully, her fingers tapping their familiar rhythm. "Okay, that's good, because you're nice and you love Daddy and you don't get mad when I talk about rocks too much. Those are good mom qualities." The four of them sat together at the breakfast table, a family assembled from broken pieces and unexpected connections, loving each other with a fierceness that defied traditional definitions. Spring arrived with the kind of cruel beauty that made everything harder. The world blooming and renewing while Jace's body continued its relentless decline felt like a cosmic joke. But they persevered, finding grace in small victories and comfort in each other's presence. The community center hosted its grand reopening in March, the facility transformed by Sabrina's funding into a state-of-the-art space serving hundreds of children with special needs. Caleb led the ribbon-cutting ceremony with Jace in his wheelchair beside him, both of them surrounded by kids whose lives would be better because of the foundation they'd built. "This is what Jace wanted," Caleb told the assembled crowd. "To know that his struggle meant something beyond his own experience. Every child who finds support and acceptance here is part of his legacy." Jace beamed from his wheelchair, too weak to speak but radiating pride. By April, Dr. Huang gently raised the conversation Sabrina had been dreading. "We need to talk about palliative care," the doctor said during a private consultation. "Jace's condition is progressing to the point where our focus needs to shift from maintenance to comfort. I want to make sure he has the best possible quality of life for whatever time remains." "How much time?" Sabrina asked, even though she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. Impossible to say precisely. Months, certainly. Maybe longer with good management, but Sabrina, we're approaching the terminal phase. I need you to be prepared. Sabrina nodded, her throat too tight for words. Caleb took her hand, anchoring her. They made the adjustments Dr. Huang recommended: increased pain management, oxygen support, a hospital bed that made Jace more comfortable. The penthouse began to look more like a hospice facility, but they decorated it with Jace's drawings and Lily's rocks and photos of their Saturday mornings at the park, making it a home rather than just a medical space. Jace faced the changes with remarkable equanimity. I'm not scared of dying, he told Sabrina one night when the pain was particularly bad. I'm sad about leaving you, but I'm not scared. Why not, sweetheart? Sabrina asked, smoothing hair back from his forehead. Because I know I'm loved. And because Caleb says that love doesn't stop just because someone's not here anymore. He still loves his wife even though she died. And you'll still love me even when I'm gone. Right? Forever and always, Sabrina promised, her voice breaking. Nothing will ever change that. And you won't be alone, Jace continued. You'll have Caleb and Lily. You'll have each other. That makes it easier, knowing you'll be okay. In May, Jace asked for one final trip to the park. I know it's hard to arrange, he said weakly, but I want to see Lily's healing circle one more time. Want to sit in the middle and feel all that love. They made it happen. Sabrina and Caleb coordinating with the medical team to ensure Jace had adequate support. The park visit required oxygen equipment and careful monitoring, but they managed it. Lily had prepared for weeks, collecting special rocks and arranging them in an even more elaborate pattern than before. When Jace's wheelchair was positioned in the center, she stood before him with an expression of solemn determination. I made the circle extra strong this time, she announced, with all my most powerful rocks, and I put wishes in every single one. Wishes for you to not hurt, for you to know you're loved, for you to be happy wherever you go next. It's beautiful, Jace whispered, his breath labored but his smile genuine. Thank you, Lily, for being my best friend, for making everything better. Friends forever, Lily said firmly, even when one friend is in heaven and one friend is still here. That's how it works. They stayed at the park until Jace's energy gave out completely, until he could barely keep his eyes open. As they packed up to leave, Lily placed something in Jace's hand, her mother's bracelet, the one she'd let him borrow months before. You keep it now, she said. Mommy's magic should go with you, to help you be brave. Jace's fingers closed weakly around the beads. Are you sure? I'm sure. You need it more than me now. Lily's voice wavered. And this way, part of my mom gets to meet you in heaven. She'll like you. I told her all about you in my prayers. Sabrina had to turn away, overwhelmed by the simple faith and profound love these children had found in each other. Caleb's arm came around her shoulders, holding her together when she felt like falling apart. The last weeks were simultaneously endless and far too short. Jace slept more, spoke less, but his presence remained luminous. Visitors came in careful rotations. Dr. Huang and the medical team who'd grown to love him, teachers from the school he'd briefly attended, children from the community center who knew him through Caleb's stories. Margaret drove down from Santa Barbara and sat with Jace for hours, telling him stories about Sabrina as a child, making her grandson laugh with tales of his mother's fierce determination even as a little girl. She gets it from you, Jace said, his voice barely audible. The strength. No, darling, Margaret corrected gently. She gets it from you. You've taught her what real courage looks like. The foundation board held a special meeting in Sabrina's penthouse, presenting Jace with an honorary position as founder and inspiration. They'd named their flagship program after him, the Jace Vale Initiative for Duchenne Research and Family Support. Your legacy is going to change lives, the board chair told him. Children who haven't even been born yet will have better futures because of what you've helped build. Jace managed a small smile. That's good. That's really good. On a warm evening in early June, with sunset painting the penthouse in gold and amber, Jace's breathing became more labored. The medical team had prepared them for this. The signs that the end was approaching, the things to expect, how to keep him comfortable. Sabrina climbed into the hospital bed beside her son, holding him gently while Caleb sat on the other side. his large hand covering Jace's small one. Lily curled at the foot of the bed, humming a wordless tune that her mother used to sing. "I love you all so much," Jace whispered, each word an effort. "Thank you for making my life beautiful." "You made our lives beautiful," Sabrina replied, tears streaming freely. "You taught us what matters, what love looks like." "Caleb?" Jace's voice was fading. "I'm here, buddy. Take care of my mom and Lily. Be a family." "I promise," Caleb said, his voice thick with grief. "We'll take care of each other." "Good." Jace's eyes drifted closed. "That's good. I'm tired now." "Then rest, sweetheart," Sabrina whispered, kissing his forehead. "We're here. You're not alone." Jace Vale died at 8:47 p.m. on June 8th, surrounded by the people who loved him most, his small hand still wearing Lily's mother's bracelet, his face peaceful in a way it hadn't been in months. The grief was devastating. Sabrina felt like she'd been hollowed out, everything essential carved away, leaving only aching emptiness. But she wasn't alone in it. Caleb held her through the sleepless nights. Lily sat with her during the long afternoons, the two of them finding comfort in shared silence. Margaret provided practical support, handling arrangements Sabrina couldn't face. The memorial service filled the largest venue Sabrina could find, hundreds of people whose lives Jace had touched in his brief time. Parents from the community center shared stories of how the programs he'd inspired had helped their children. Researchers spoke about the foundation's work and the hope it represented. Lily stood at the podium, her voice clear and steady as she read a letter she'd written to her friend. "Dear Jace, you were the best friend I ever had. You never made me feel weird for being different. You taught me that different is just another way of being perfect. I'm going to miss you every day, but I'm going to keep being your friend by being kind to other kids who feel alone. That's how I'll remember you, by making the world a little bit better, just like you did. Love, Lily." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. In the months that followed, Sabrina learned to navigate grief the way Caleb had taught her, by allowing it space while also choosing to keep living. She threw herself into the foundation's work, honoring Jace's legacy through tangible action. The programs expanded rapidly, serving families across the country, funding research that showed genuine promise. The community center became her second home, where she volunteered alongside Caleb, working with children who needed the same patience and belief that had helped Jace. She wasn't a trained therapist, but she had other skills: fundraising, advocacy, the ability to make things happen through sheer determination. And slowly, carefully, she and Caleb built a life together. Not to replace what they'd lost, but to honor it by creating something new and beautiful from the broken pieces. They married in a small ceremony the following spring, with Lily as their flower girl and an empty chair draped with Jace's favorite blanket to represent his presence. Margaret officiated, speaking about families that form through choice and love rather than just biology. "We gather to celebrate two people who found each other in the darkness and chose to walk toward light together," Margaret said, "who learned that love isn't about perfection or permanence, but about showing up with honest hearts and staying even when it's hard." Sabrina stood beside Caleb in a simple dress, no designer label necessary, and made promises that felt sacred in their simplicity. To love and support, to show up and stay present, to build a family from intention and care, to honor those they'd lost by living fully in the time they had. When they exchanged rings, Sabrina wore one that incorporated a small diamond from Jace's baby bracelet, carrying a piece of her son into this new chapter. The reception was held at the community center, filled with children who Jace had never met, but whose lives were better because of the foundation he'd inspired. They ate cake and danced and celebrated the kind of love that transcended loss, that chose hope even after heartbreak. Lily made a toast, her speech carefully prepared and delivered with the same fierce sincerity she brought to everything. "My daddy and my new mom are the bravest people I know. They love people who they knew they'd lose, and they loved them anyway. That's real courage. And I'm proud to be their daughter." As the evening wound down, Sabrina found herself on the center's new playground, standing at the memorial garden they'd created in Jace's honor. A beautiful space filled with rocks Lily had chosen, plants that attracted butterflies, benches where families could sit and remember. At the center stood a bronze statue, a child in a wheelchair with arms outstretched, face lifted toward the sun, captured in a moment of pure joy. The plaque read, Jace Vale, 2018 to 2025. He taught us that courage looks like showing up, that love means being present, and that every life, no matter how brief, can change the world. Caleb joined her, slipping his hand into hers. He'd love this place. He made this place possible, Sabrina corrected. Everything we built came from what he taught us.
What did he teach you? Caleb asked gently. Sabrina considered the question, thinking about the woman she'd been before that night she'd heard laughter from her son's room. The CEO who measured worth in profit margins and controlled every variable. The mother who'd hidden behind busy schedules because presence felt too painful. He taught me that the richest person isn't the one with the most money, she said finally. It's the one with the most love, the one who shows up, the one who stays even when leaving would be easier. He taught me what actually matters when you strip away everything else. And what matters? Caleb prompted, though his smile suggested he already knew. This. Sabrina gestured to the garden, the center, the life they'd built. Community, connection, the courage to love even when loss is inevitable, the grace to accept help instead of trying to control everything alone. This matters. We matter. Lily ran up to them then, her arms full of rocks she'd found in the garden's meditation space. Look, these are perfect specimens. Can we add them to Jace's collection? They'd created a display case inside the center with Jace's favorite things, drawings, photos from park visits, the coupon book of promises he'd given Sabrina that final Christmas, and rocks. So many rocks that Lily had contributed, each one carrying a memory or a wish or a moment of connection. Of course we can add them, Sabrina said, crouching to Lily's level. That's what collections are for, growing with new treasures that remind us of love. As they walked back inside together, Sabrina, Caleb, and Lily, a family assembled from loss and choice and stubborn hope, Sabrina felt Jace's presence not as absence but as legacy. He lived in every child who found support at the center, in every research breakthrough the foundation funded, in the way Sabrina now prioritized presence over profit and measured success in moments instead of metrics. The richest person in the story wasn't the billionaire with the penthouse and the corporate empire. It was the mother who'd learned to show up, the single father who'd chosen purpose over prestige, the two unusual children who'd taught their parents what love actually looked like. It was all of them together, building something beautiful from broken pieces, proving that the best investments weren't measured in dollars, but in the moments we choose to be present for each other. And as the sun set over the community center that bore Jace's name, Sabrina understood what her son had known all along, that she was finally truly wealthy in all the ways that actually mattered. Not because she had everything, but because she'd learned to cherish what she had while she had it, to love without reservation, and to measure her life not in years or achievements, but in the heart she'd touched and the love she'd given freely. That was Jace's final gift to her, the knowledge that the only currency that mattered in the end was how thoroughly and bravely you loved, even when loving meant losing, even when staying meant breaking, even when the only promise you could make was to show up for one more day and then another until the days became a life worth living. And she was living it now, fully and present and grateful for every imperfect, beautiful moment.